This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Perhaps, thought Nanny, little green Elphaba chose her own sex and her own color, and to hell with her parents. It's wicked, and this film is lit. Hello, and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. It is part one of our 2026 summer series. We're talking about 2024's Wicked. So much to talk about, so much to get into. As always, if you've been here for these summer series before, we do the episodes a little bit different. Normally, I don't read the book, Katie does, then we both watch the movie. For these summer series, we both read the book, both watch the movie, and then just kind of deep dive, compare our points, our opinions, dive in deep on these and see, what they changed, what we like about it, what we didn't. Lots to talk about on this one. So we're going to jump right in. If you have not read or watched Wicked, we're going to give you a summary of the film.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
This summary is sourced from Wikipedia. In the land of Oz, Glinda the Good joins the citizens of Munchkin Land as they celebrate the death of the Wicked Witch of the West. When asked why wickedness happens, Glinda explains that the witch was the product of an affair between Governor Throp's wife, Melena, and a mysterious traveling salesman. The salesman offered Melena a green elixir, causing the witch to be born with green skin. Maligned from birth for her skin and impulsive use of magical powers, the witch fostered a wish to meet the wonderful Wizard of Oz, the ruler of Oz famed for his power to grant wishes. When the Munchkins ask if Glinda was friends with the witch, she reflects on their relationship back at school. Years earlier, green-skinned Elphaba Throp escorts younger sister Nessa Rose on her first day at Shiz University. Nessa Rose's paraplegia causes the staff to patronize her, prompting an emotional outburst of Elphaba's powers. Shiz's Dean of Sorcery Studies, Madame Morrible, offers to enroll and privately tutor Elphaba in sorcery. She accepts, hoping she can fulfill her dream of working with the wizard. Elphaba clashes constantly with her roommate, the popular Galinda Upland, who longs to become Morrible's student. Elphaba's history professor is Dr. Dillamond, a talking goat who faces discrimination as one of Shiz's last animal professors. She follows him to a meeting of animals off campus. Learning the animals are somehow losing their ability to speak, Elphaba assures Dillamond the wizard will set it right. Rebellious prince and transfer student Fiero takes a group of students to a party at the Ozdust Ballroom nightclub. When Munchkin Bach Woodsman asks Galinda to accompany him, she convinces him to invite Nessa Rose so she can attend with Fiero instead. Nessa Rose is overjoyed, and in thanks, Elphaba convinces Morrible to allow Galinda to study sorcery as well. When Elphaba is ridiculed at the Ozdust for wearing an ugly black hat gifted by Galinda as a practical joke, a remorseful Galinda dances with her and the two begin to bond. When Dillamond informs the class that animals are no longer allowed to teach at Shiz, he is forcibly removed from the classroom and replaced by the unscrupulous Professor Nicodic, who demonstrates a cage containing a frightened lion cub, designed to prevent animals from learning to speak. Elphaba angrily spins poppy dust over the room and escapes with Fiero when the class falls unconscious. They release the cub into the forest, and Elphaba laments her unrequited feelings for Fiero, who has chosen Galinda. Elphaba receives an invitation from the wizard, who has been made aware of her powers by Morrible. She arrives in the Emerald City with Galinda, now calling herself Glinda, in solidarity with Dillamond, who constantly mispronounced her name. Their meeting with the wizard, in which they're surprised to learn he's an ordinary man, is witnessed by Morrible. They induce Elphaba to cast a levitation spell from the sacred grimoire, a spell book that only powerful sorcerers can read and comprehend, causing the wizard's monkey guards to painfully sprout wings. As the wizard and Morrible rejoice over their newfound ability to use the monkeys as spies, Elphaba realizes they are the ones behind the animal's oppression and that the fraudulent wizard, unable to read the grimoire and lacking real magic of his own, used her to subjugate them further. A horrified Elphaba seizes the grimoire and flees. Glinda follows Elphaba, who refuses to apologize to the wizard as Morrible denounces her to all of Oz. Elphaba tries to escape the Emerald City in the wizard's hot air balloon, but the way up is barred and the balloon burns up. High in a palace attic, Elphaba repeats the levitation spell on a broom. She urges Glinda to come with her, but Glinda chooses to remain behind. The two share an emotional farewell. Fiyero leaves Shiz on horseback amidst a mass evacuation, while Governor Throp suffers a fatal heart attack when he and Nessa Rose receive the news. Elphaba flies west, leaving Glinda behind.
All right, that was a summary of the film Wicked. Format's a little bit different for these summer series, so we're going to start by discussing all the stuff that we thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
My first note is a little dumb nitpick thing that I just noticed is that in the movie at the very beginning when they're flying in, not the very beginning, I guess, but near the very beginning, when they're flying in and we fly into the town where the opening number takes place, we see a sign outside the town that says Munchkin Land. Yeah. But it's like just outside this town. Right. Which felt a little silly to me because Munchkin Land is like an entire region.
It's the whole like province or whatever.
And in the movie, it looks like it's kind of implying that this town is Munchkin Land.
It's
fine.
It's been a very, very long time since I've seen the 1939 film. But I do wonder if that's like a direct reference to that. Like if there is a sign in that movie.
Yeah, it could be. Oh, I mean, the whole point is that they're just establishing where we are, which makes sense. And it's not the end of the world because, again, you could have a sign for the whole area, I guess, outside of it. It just feels a little like if you've read the book, you're like, well, that's not really, again, doesn't really matter. But I still wanted to mention it.
So the movie and the book start out kind of similarly, where we get Elphaba's backstory. Yeah. But I felt like the movie really simplifies her backstory a lot. I thought both of her parents were more interesting and complex characters, and her relationship with them and with Nanny, who's a character that's not even in the movie.
I think you could argue is ostensibly kind of in the movie, but I think Cece Bear or whatever her called is Dulcie Bear is essentially it's kind of supposed to be Nanny.
Yeah, but very different takes on
they're nothing alike. I just think that is who I think that Bear character is pulled from Nanny would be my guess.
But at any rate, I felt like Elphaba's relationship with her family in the book was a lot more like real, like kind of messy, but realistic and more realistic than just like her mom is dead and her dad hates her, which is what the movie boils it down to. Yeah. But there's a whole lot more going on in the book.
No, I completely agree. This was a big note I had, and probably one of the things that I liked most about the book compared to the movie and I guess the musical by extension was just how much we learn about her parents and their relationship. For instance, in the movie, they make her father the mayor and later the governor of Munchkin Land. Whereas in the book, he is a priest or like a preacher, which I thought was really interesting. And we'll get more into that in a little bit here, specifically about the religion, because that's another aspect of the book that I think is really compelling. But stuff like that. And then I also thought that in the movie, we kind of just see very quickly and briefly, her dad leaves for something, and then the wizard, we don't know in that moment, storms in and has an affair with her, and you're like, it's all very okay, what's going on here? But in the book, we get a lot more explanation for why Helena, which is the name, which I don't even know if we know her name in the
It's
music.
Milena
In the movie?
in the book. Yeah,
No, I know. I'm saying the movie. I don't even know if they mention her
I don't
name.
think her name is ever actually said.
That was my point.
Although it is in the Wikipedia summary.
Yeah, that was my point. Is like, for instance, in the movie, we don't even know her name.
Yeah.
But we know a lot more about Helena's, her infidelity, why she's, why she cheats on him and stuff like that, and kind of the nature of their relationship. I thought was really interesting and better explained in the book. I really liked there's a little detail, and then this is kind of just part of Elphaba's backstory that I liked in the book, which is that there's at one point Helena, while she's pregnant with Elphaba, like says that she can sense that she knew that the baby would be a singing child.
Yes.
Which I thought was a funny little,
Yeah.
again, since we know it became a musical and it's not a he, it's a she. But I also like the nature of their relationship between Helena and Frex.
It is Milena.
Is it Milena? It's not
Yeah.
Helena. Oh,
No.
you're right. It is Milena. I just wrote it down right. Yeah, Milena. Sorry, I knew that. That's a character from like not Dark Souls. Maybe there's one of the most recent video games that came out. Milena is like a villain in that, and so my brain was like, well, it's not that. It's something else. Anyways, Milena, like. She has a great line early where she says about her, she wasn't much given to worrying about moral failings as a rule. Having a minister as a husband seemed to stir enough religious thought for one couple.
Yeah.
They have this like contentious relationship that I think the book wants us to find kind of endearing and kind of is, but is also, it's just interesting.
I feel like it is kind of a complicated, messy, and maybe realistic relationship in that sense.
Yeah.
There's kind of a lot of layers going on where I think they do care about each other. Like I think
Yes.
Milena does care about Frex. I think she loves him in a way.
In a way, yes.
But also you get the sense that maybe like they fell in love young
Yes.
and like did not think about that they were kind
100%.
of ill-suited to each other.
Yes, she is
'Cause she like comes from money or
yes.
like power position.
She has a title technically, and like she's for the Throp second descending, I guess, or
Yeah.
whatever. Because I believe Elphaba's the Throp third descending, and yeah, so she has like a title and a little bit of money and to her name and stuff like that. And he, as a preacher, lives a very
He's interested in
aesthetic lifestyle.
living a very like spare kind of
Yes.
lifestyle. So she's
so
like
there's
she's like living in the backwoods with him.
tension there, and there was like lust and they had sex a lot earlier in their relationship, but that has also faded, and she is still a very lusty woman. They make point of several times in the story. And so that's part of the reason there's just a lot going on with their relationship that I thought was interesting. And specifically also between Elphaba and her father, a thing that I thought was really compelling that the movie doesn't touch on really at all is that there's one line, and it is, the movie captures most of the general tension of their relationship, which is that he likes Nessa more than her and like, cherishes her more. But there is a little line at some point in her childhood where Frex whittles her a little wooden bird, and he also calls her Fabula or Fabala or whatever. He has like a special name for her, and he says that it's their pact against the world, and he like cuddles with her, and there's at least an implication that at least for some period of time he did kind of become taken by her and didn't completely like reject her entire childhood.
Yeah, I am interested to see if we interact with Frex at all in the second half of the book.
Yeah, if he shows back up or if he's just dead. Like
and like kind of see where he is, because whereas the musical and the movie kind of boil the whole familial relationship down to the wife doesn't like the husband, then the father doesn't like the daughter.
Yeah.
In the book, what we're getting is more complex and layered than that.
Yes, it's like they all like each other and dislike each other for reasons that are myriad and make sense and are defensible in some ways and indefensible in other ways. And yeah, it is interesting. And another little detail that I thought that is in the book that I thought was really compelling, that's kind of more of like world building stuff, but it is part of their backstory, is that we find out like Frex is a Munchkin lander, but he's tall, as is Elphaba and Milena. We find out that it's because all well-renowned bloodlines within Munchkin land married into height.
Yes.
So that peasant Munchkins are short, but the like gentry,
the gentry
the
class.
gentrified Munchkins are tall.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. Again, a little bit of world building that I thought was kind of compelling and makes sense too. And you find out, like, you'd be like, well, if Elphaba's from Munchkin land, why is she
Yeah, because she appears to be like
Yeah.
a normal height,
Yeah.
but she's like the peak of society for Munchkinland. Like, because her family is like the ruler.
Yes, she's one of the within the bloodline of some of the
like the ruling
ruling
class.
class of within Munchkinland. Yeah.
I mentioned Nanny earlier. I really liked her character. I thought she
agree.
was super interesting.
Yep.
And I'm very interested to see if or how the book uses her character moving forward.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see what she does in the second half. But I completely agree. I thought she was a really compelling character in this first part of the book. She had some great moments that I thought that are really good. And she kind of acts as a little bit of like the moral compass in relation to Elphaba, especially compared to the parents. She's kind of there to like nudge them along to be good parents.
Yeah, she's kind of a voice of reason. Like she shows up and they're both freaking out about the fact that their baby's green, and she's like, it's still a baby.
Yes. Like she has the line, have you even touched this child yet, you two? And then later when she's talking to Elphaba, she tells Elphaba, Nanny likes you. And then the text says, she was lying through her teeth, but unlike Frex, she believed some lies were sanctioned by heaven.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that she's also a complicated character who has these weird eccentricities that make her like not a great person.
Yeah, she has some unlikable stuff about her.
But she, at her core, seems to be a caring person who cares for these children and wants to keep them safe and like take care of them and stuff in a way that I thought was really compelling and kind of nice. She also corrects the parents. They call Elphaba like a little devil at some point, and she says, this child is no devil. And she like kind of constantly corrects them and like tries to coax them towards actually caring about this child, which I thought was nice. And that's also where the line, and I guess it's not specifically, I guess, she thinks it, but that's where the line from the intro that I read came from. It's the end of a chapter, and it says, perhaps, thought Nanny, little green Elphaba chose her own sex and her own color, to hell with her parents. And you can tell there's this energy that Nanny kind of admires Elphaba as like,
she's a little rebellious.
Although, she admires her spirit and her spunk and whatnot in a way that I thought is, again, I like.
So jumping back just like a teeny tiny bit to actually before Elphaba is born in the book. Let's talk about the clock of the time dragon, because I was not expecting this to be like a whole thing at the beginning of this book. The time dragon is mentioned at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. And like Glinda's voiceover. And it's always a feature of the stage show's set. Yeah,
I had forgotten about that while reading the book, and then when I read that note of yours, I was like, "Oh, that's right. It is part of the set."
I've seen Wicked a couple times, and I guess it's just always like how the set is done. Yeah, it always has the dragon, the clock and the dragon like over the entire set piece. But the way that it was utilized in the book, I thought was really intriguing. It's like this weird little circus sideshow that comes to town and stirs up shit.
Yes. It has started its own religion even. Yeah. Called like TikTokism, that are like people who like worship the dragon clock. There's a giant clockwork clock that these dwarves, I think they say dwarves, drag around the countryside to towns, and it like shows up and acts out little puppet shows of the villagers' transgressions.
Yes.
Like Frex sees one where it's a tale of some dude named Grine who cheats on his wife with a widow and her daughter, and it's this very explicit bawdy puppet show about where they show him like having sex with these two women, but it seems to be indicative of a thing that actually happened, because then like he like gets run out of town, and like he seems to like kind of admit to it basically, like
I mean it seems, I guess whether or not it's true is not really the point.
No, it's not really the point, but like seems,
but the point is that people believe it.
Yes.
When they see this little act put on, they buy the story that it's telling.
Yeah, and I thought I got the implication, at least from that first story, that it was true. That the thing about that the Grine and those two women was true. And so I was like, okay, so maybe it does have some kind of magical something that it is able to know. Or it could just be a thing where it's it's not magical, but it's the dwarves have some sort of spies or something, and they get this information about people, and who knows? I don't know. I don't know if we'll get more about that or if it's just kind of background world building. But it is interesting, and I did enjoy that.
And then so Frex he's preaching against the time dragon because it's unholy,
Yes,
sinful.
Yes.
Against his religion,
Yeah.
anyway, which is unionism.
Yeah, we'll talk. I have a bunch of notes about the religion here in like just a second.
So he is away from his wife when Elphaba is born, and I forget exactly what the story that the Time Dragon puppet show is something about him.
It's about him being like stealing money, basically being like a fake preacher who's just like taking their money and yeah.
So he's hiding from Munchkinlanders trying to get him. And so
which I guess you could argue is evidence that maybe it's not true.
Yeah, because that was one of the things that I thought. Because
he's not really like a grifter.
Yeah, there's no evidence of that. We know that Milena has some money because she comes from money, but there's no... There's no evidence that he's like a grifter.
I guess you could argue that within the greater, I think there's maybe some larger metatextual, not metatextual, but larger narrative that unionism, the religion, is kind of
a grift
generally, and that it maybe is more of a criticism of unionism, which is this universe's Christianity, as it's criticizing that and saying it's like a sham, a scam, as opposed to him specifically being somebody who's doing something. But it does imply that he is the one being shady, which is not, again, at least everything that we've seen, not the case. He's a true believer who is trying to be a preacher.
But so then when Elphaba is born, these two women from the town help her mother. And I thought this was a really interesting scene because we know that the women in the town do not like Milena.
Yes.
We've established this already, but there are a couple little details that I really liked from this scene. It's an old woman and a young woman helping her, and then the three of them make up the pagan concept of the maiden, mother, and crone during this scene. And then
which makes it that paganism is referenced explicitly in this. And now I guess it's a different version of paganism. It's Ozian paganism.
It's Ozian paganism, and there is an old Ozian pagan religion that is referenced often throughout the text. And she ends up giving birth actually inside the clock of the time dragon.
Yes.
And I also thought it was interesting that after Elphaba is born, the women have this initial disagreement about whether she's a boy or a girl.
Yes.
Or they're looking at her genitals and they're it's a boy. No, it's a girl.
Yeah.
And then Elphaba bites one of their fingers off because she's born with sharp teeth.
She's born with sharp teeth, and so she bites one of their fingers off. It's fantastic. Also, that scene also has a great line where Nanny is holding her, and she's just kind of sitting there right after she's born. And Nanny says to her, "Whine, you fiend! It's your first job." Which that line specifically, I just thought was very funny.
Another random lore thing that I liked is that Elphaba is named after a unionist saint.
Yes,
actually,
Fabula, I think, is her name, and that's why and that's why
I think it was Elphaba, with an A. I thought, or something
you're right,
maybe
that. AEL.
I think it was maybe a masculine version of it or something.
But the nickname of that saint, I think, was Fabula, which is why he calls her Fabula.
And that's the kind of lore I want to know.
Yeah, but speaking of the theology of Oz. That was one of the things I was not expecting in this book that I thought was really cool, and that it doesn't really show up at all in the musical or the movie, other than in very passing. You hear some stuff mentioned a little bit, but it doesn't get explored at all. You mentioned earlier the paganism of Oz, and it explains that Nanny is a believer in said paganism, which is that the idea that Ozma, the Ozma of Oz, is the daughter of Lurline, who was the fairy goddess of Oz, who is basically the pagan
who created
goddess.
Oz. Yeah.
And their creation, which I don't think I have it written here, part of their creation myth is that Lurline peed all over Oz and that created a river.
A river.
Yeah.
Which is very pagan.
It's very fun. And so... And their part of their belief is that all of the Ozmas since then have been reincarnations of Ozma, as opposed to just the Ozma is the title for the ruler, but part of the pagan belief system is that similar to something like some sort of like Eastern like emperor like lines where they believe they're all essentially like maybe not reincarnation is the right word, but like have the spirit of some like they're like god rulers essentially.
Yeah, like a pharaoh or something like that.
Yes, exactly. And so the idea is that all of the Ozmas have been kind of these reincarnations of Ozma, and Frex, who is a unionist preacher, thinks all of this is nonsense. We also learn about TikTokism, which I mentioned, and who Frex thinks hardly qualifies as a religion, but that is the religion specifically based on the dragon clock, and also just, I think, probably generally around like mechanical stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's maybe like, because it is this almost magical technology,
right? And Oz, within the context of this book, Oz is undergoing like an industrial revolution of sorts.
We are, which is another thing, and I don't know if I had this note anywhere else, but I wrote it in my book notes while I was reading. We find out that like Dillamond invented microscopes like over the course, at least that's the implication I got, is that he basically like invents microscopes over the course of this book in order to do the study that he's doing and stuff like that. So yeah, we are kind of at the industrial revolution of Oz right now, which is also very interesting, and it comes across a little bit in the movie,
like a tiny bit.
Like we see some of the technology stuff, and with the wizard at the end is like building the roads and stuff like that. But yeah, another thing we see later in the book is Bach admiring a bunch of inspirational posters at some shop or something like that, and they represent the different religions. One of them is the pagan religion, which again is the people who worship Lurline. There's the authoritarians, who are people who kind of worship the wizard specifically, which is he's now his own thing. And then unionists, they worship the unnamed god, which is what they refer to as their god. And in my opinion, they're like the Christian stand-ins here.
I think it's pretty clear that that's meant to be a Christian stand-in.
Pretty obviously what it is. And part of their myth and part of Lurline, the creation myth, is that the animals, because a whole big part of this is trying to figure out why, and I didn't realize that in the book it was going to be capital A animals versus lowercase animals, but there are animals who can speak, who have the spirit or
they have
whatever.
Consciousness.
Yeah, and there are animals who can't, and they're trying to figure out like what the difference is, what's going on there, and so they're doing research into like the creation myths of like what did people used to believe about why that difference occurs. And in the Lurline faith, it's because in their creation myth, as we mentioned, Lurline urinated a river, and all of the animals who dared to cross it became capital A animals who could speak, and all of the ones who didn't stayed as regular, like lower animals or whatever. Yeah. The unionist version of that myth that they then took and updated is that when the world was flooded by the unnamed god, he cried a bunch of tears for some reason. I can't remember what exactly about, but flooded the world, and the animals who like consumed enough of his tears or drank his tears,
they become capital A
A animals. And so all of that stuff I thought was really, like, again, just showing the ways that religions form and change and morph and how they're inspired by each other. It's not super complex. Like it's a very like surface level.
It's not groundbreaking
depiction of all of that stuff.
But it's the kind of world building that I really appreciate.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And again, it's not incredibly deep or like, you know, because there's like, if you compare it to like some of the religions and stuff within something like Game of Thrones, there's I think a little bit more thought has gone into that, and it's not as direct of like this is their version of Christianity. This is their version of you know what I mean? This is a little bit more didactic in a way that feels like a little simpler and a little less genius. I don't know. It's a little more obvious, I guess, but it's still really compelling, and I think works for the universe that this story is setting up. We also find out that, for instance, that Nessa Rose is anti-sorcery. It's an element of her character that doesn't really translate to the musical at all.
No, she's like really religious in the book.
Super religious in the book. As her father's favorite daughter, she has followed in his footsteps as being very, very religious, and she's a very traditional unionist. But there's this really compelling part in the book where Glinda explains that she's been doing a bunch of research into sorcery, and that like there's these local and practical roots to sorcery, that like sorcery isn't really about like fancy spells and stuff. It was like used by, kind of alluding to the idea of like indigenous cultures using
like the practical aspects
of like herbology and stuff like that for like medicine and traditional culture stuff.
And if we were to compare it to the real world, like these kind of practical like folk medicines and things that then later get maligned as witchcraft.
Yes. And there were aspects of it in part of those beliefs. Like they were thought of as magical and stuff, but again,
Yeah.
and so the story kind of plays around with all of that in a ways that I thought was really interesting. And then we also find out specifically that Elphaba's like, well, I'm an atheist, and I was like, yeah. But an anti-spiritualist. But I also thought it was kind of interesting in a world where sorcery objectively exists. But she does say, like, she understands that, but she views it more almost like as a science, kind of, is like the impression I got, is that it's like a type of science, or a type of, it's like another like physical force in the world that you can like study and learn. And that it's not, and she doesn't think it like derives from the unnamed god or Lurline or something like that.
Well, and I think that's interesting too, though, because I think if something akin to sorcery existed in our world, that would also probably be how a lot of people viewed it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it probably, because it would depend. Yeah, I mean, that's probably how it would be, because that's what it would be ostensibly. If it manifested in a way that you could study and interact with the way it seems to in this universe, then it does kind of just become a different branch of like science or something. You know what I mean?
And
like,
and it seems like they can, because Glinda is majoring in sorcery ostensibly.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. But anyway, so I really like all of the religion stuff. I think it's all very interesting and makes for a much more enriching, like, kind of background
it's
for
very
the world.
compelling, and it makes for a world that feels old.
Yes, it feels old, it feels lived in, and it feels like it obviously has direct allegorical ties to our universe and our world in a way that makes it, you know, you can pull some, and again, it's a little didactic, but you can pull some moral messaging out of it and kind of really see the point that the author is trying to make, at least so far. Again, maybe that'll get really muddled and weird and meandering and pointless in the second half of the book. We shall see.
Another character that is in the book that does not make it into the movie at all is Turtleheart.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I thought Turtleheart was a really fascinating character.
I agree.
I loved just in general, I loved the inclusion of the different people inhabiting Oz, which is something we don't really see
like in the movie. There's people talked about being from different areas in Oz, but they all seem vaguely the same.
Vaguely just human.
Yeah.
Whereas Turtleheart is a quadling. And quadlings, at least in this first half of the book, seem to be a metaphor for like indigenous people.
Very explicitly seem to be. Yeah, I would be amazed if that's not the intention.
I mean, I do kind of want to see what we're doing with the Winkies.
Yeah, I don't know what that's...
But because we haven't actually interacted with them yet.
Not other than Fiyero, briefly.
And I do think that maybe then it might be a little problematic that the quadlings are described as having reddish purple skin. But I also think the different colors of the different people in Oz in the book are like in line with what it is in the original books.
Yeah.
Because the different parts of Oz are like color coded.
Yeah.
In the Oz books.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. But it is very clear because, like, in the book, it is explicitly explained that the quadlings in their area called the Oxel or Oval. Oval is their, like, area, I think.
I thought that was the town. That
maybe that's the town.
I mean, there's a map in the front.
Maybe that's just the town. I don't know what the quadling country is called. The
I think
marshes.
It might be called Quadling Country.
Might be. But they tried to stop the Oz.
Yeah, it is.
Just called Quadling Country?
Quadling Country,
All right, there you go. But they tried to stop the other Ozians from building on their land because their ecosystem is super delicate. They have this like marshland that they live in that is all like, it's like a wetland that where the amount of water and stuff and all of it's a very delicate ecosystem.
You throw it off balance and you're fucked.
Yes. And so Turtleheart, actually, we're introduced to him because he comes up and meets Milena and them because he's on his way or was on his way to the Emerald City to petition the wizard on behalf of the quadlings, which I thought was really compelling. And they specifically say that later that the wizard drained the wetlands or whatever to mine rubies from them, basically rounded up the quadlings, put them onto reservations and starved them. Again, it is very explicitly an allegory for the indigenous people in the U.S. There's a quote in the book where I think it's Elphaba says, "It's a systematic marginalizing of populations, Glinda. That's what the wizard's all about."
Yeah.
And like I said, I couldn't decide. I was like, I can't decide how I feel about the political messaging in this, if it's too literal and too didactic or if it's fine. I think largely I landed on the side of like, it's fine.
It's fine. I think it's fine.
It is a little, at times you're like, okay.
I think you have a note somewhere in here about this being for like people in their 20s.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
About the book being for people in their 20s.
Verdict,
And I think you're right on the nose about that. And I also think that some like the way that Elphaba, for instance, talks about like the political implications of things that are going on in Oz, it is a little bit on the nose, but I think she also talks about it in the way that like
a naive college student.
a 20-something college student talks about politics.
Yeah. This is way more of a college book than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And we have notes about that later. It is way more about the experience of being a early 20s, mid 20-year-old than I expected. And it's actually like really fascinating. And we'll talk more about it later, but it is absolutely part of what makes the writing style so unique, or not the writing style unique, because the writing style is not unique at all, but we'll get into it later. But yeah, I think the target demographic and the target audiences of this book lends it to be something very kind of unique that I think also maybe is part of what turns off a lot of readers.
Maybe, I think
maybe
you're probably
because it
right
has
about
very
that.
mixed reviews in a way that I think is we'll talk about it. But I agree. I also thought it was really fun that Elphaba's first word is horrors.
Yes.
And she gets radicalized as a baby because she listens to Turtleheart explain, talk about the subjugation of his people.
They ask him at one point when she's like a toddler.
Yes,
and
she
they
hasn't
ask him,
spoken yet. Yeah,
they ask him. They're like, "Well, why did you leave Ovals?"
Yeah,
and he just says horrors,
yeah.
which relatable.
Yeah,
and she just starts repeating the word horrors.
Yeah. And it's like, but it's a great little character moment because she has been exposed to the struggle of oppressed people from the moment she could literally speak. And in fact, her first word was in reference to that. So there was no chance she was going to be anything other than a revolutionary, which I thought was fun. I also thought there was an interesting little moment where we find out that Turtleheart seems to think that Elphaba can like foresee the arrival of the wizard.
Yeah, because he's a glass blower.
He's a glass blower.
That's his trade.
Yeah.
And when he first arrives, he blows some glass and he makes like a scrying mirror, essentially, that he can see things with.
Yeah. And he says, horrors, murmured Elphaba. Turtleheart tumbled to his knees. She sees him coming, he said thickly. And this is before Elphaba's a little kid. The wizard is not here yet. She sees him to come. He is to come from the air, is arriving. A balloon from the sky, the color of a bubble of blood, a huge crimson globe, a ruby globe. He falls from the sky. The regent is fallen. The house of Ozma is fallen. The clock was right. A minute to judgment. He fell over almost into Elphaba's small lap. And so, yeah, like, she seems to be able to have some sort of foresight and sees the coming horrors of the wizard, which I thought was interesting. Oh, and another thing about Turtleheart that I forgot is that later we find out that he was sacrificed by the people of the town in order to supposedly attempt to end a drought.
Yeah.
Because there's a big drought going on, and right before Nessa Rose was born, the people in the town sacrificed Turtleheart. And I think you could potentially infer that they say that the reason in the book that Nessa Rose doesn't have arms, which spoilers, we'll get to that later, but the reason she is disabled in the book is because what is it in the book? Because in the movie they say she's chewing milkweed.
She's chewing like milk of the poppy or something like that. Yeah,
and that ends up causing her to be premature, and that's why her legs don't work. But there's a reason in the book that I can't recall. But I think you could almost argue because they kill Turtleheart right before Nessa Rose is born.
Yeah.
And it is strongly inferred that Nessa Rose is probably Turtleheart's child.
Probably, because they've been having an affair
for years and years and years. The book explicitly says that Milena doesn't know whether it's Frex's or Turtleheart's, but you could strongly infer that it's probably Turtleheart's based on just the amount of sex her and Turtleheart were having versus her and Frex. But and so I think you could read potentially that maybe her disability was like the result of like some curse or something from the town killing Turtle Heart or some, I don't know. You could play, there may be something there. I swear there was something in the book, and now I can't remember.
I can't remember now.
That I thought they said in the book what the explanation for why. I just can't remember what it was. Anyways.
Continuing on just characters. Galinda.
Yes.
I found her really interesting in the book.
I agree.
I thought she was a little more fleshed out than she is in the movie.
It's like a similar character in the movie. It's just that you don't know that she's that character in the movie.
Right. 'Cause we actually spend quite a bit of time in her perspective in the book. So I think you could infer that she probably does have this kind of rich inner life in the movie.
I think if you've read the book, you can see this in the characterization in the movie.
Yeah.
But if you haven't read the book, you would never gather this about her necessarily from what you see in the movie, I think is the way I would put it. Yeah.
But she's very intelligent. She's striving to reach beyond her station one way or another. I think it's really interesting that she clearly has this interest in architecture.
Yes.
Like as we meet her as she's on her way to Shiz, and she's really excited to get to the city and like see the really cool architecture.
Yeah.
I also think like another thing that's interesting is that explicitly in the book, she is upper class. But she's clearly on like the low end of the upper class, which the movie flattens into just she's a rich girl.
She's a rich girl, yeah. No, and because I wanted to read this brief section from the book that touches on some characterization and this is like some of the heavy lifting the characterization they do for Glinda here. When she arrives at Shiz and she's looking at all the other students arriving, looking about her, she could tell that some of these dollies came from families much better off than hers. The pearls and diamonds on them. Galinda was glad she had chosen a simple silver collar with metonite struts. There was something vulgar about traveling in jewels, and then this next part is the part that I really like too. As she realized this truth, she codified it into a saying. At the earliest perfect opportunity, she would bring it out as proof of her having opinions and of having traveled. The overdressed traveler betrays more interest in being seen than in seeing, she murmured, trying it out. While the true traveler knows that the novel world about her serves as the most appropriate accessory. Good. Very good. And that little moment of her, like...
Yeah.
You learn so much about her in that just, like, one paragraph or whatever. Again, to what you said, that she's not as wealthy as some of these other girls here. Her family has less money than them.
But she, like, knows that, and she understands how to try and, like... position herself to make up for that.
Yes, but also knows like just that idea of like wanting to be seen as somebody who has opinions. Like she's like, I come up with sayings because that's a thing smart people do. That's a thing important people do.
Another thing that feels very college-y.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. And I do think the movie captures a little bit of that, or tries to capture a little bit of that. When she first meets Bach in the movie, she says like, I don't remember the exact exchange, but it's something about like, him being a stranger and or whatever, and she says like, you know what I believe, Bach? Strangers are just people I've never met, or something like that. And so she says this like, it's like her trying to like philosophize.
Like,
She's trying to,
a thing that sounds a little bit smarter than maybe what it is.
Yes, it's kind of tautologist in a way that is just like, but it attempts to sound more philosophical and interesting than it is. And so I do think the movie captures that element of her personality. But like I said, I don't know if you would necessarily know underneath what was motivating that from having just watched the movie. But I also really like, there's a line that describes her in the book. I think this is from her perspective. Glinda didn't often stop to consider whether she believed in what she said or not. The whole point of conversation was flow. She just talks to talk because she knows that that's how conversations are supposed to work. And I also thought it was really fun that when Glinda and Elphaba have like their first actual conversation, they actually have like a really deep conversation about the nature of evil and what Unionists thought about evil in like the early days and stuff like that. So they actually have like a meaningful conversation. And then later we find out that Glinda stays at Shiz over the summer, which is another element another thing implying that she's either not wanted back home or too poor to travel back home for the summer. Again, just little details like that. She also, when they get to the Emerald City, because she is such an architecture fan, the book makes an explicit point of calling out that she hates the architecture in the Emerald City.
It's too modern.
It's too modern. It's not fancy enough for her, or not, maybe not fancy enough, but it's too modern. But yeah, she has a lot. She has opinions. She has stuff going on. And again, it's not that it's not there in the movie. It's just not. You kind of have to guess.
Yeah, I think you would have to infer what's going on in Glinda's head for the movie. And I think if you hadn't read the book, you probably would not infer those same things.
Those same things. I agree. Another little thing, like a world building lore thing in the book that I really like is the discussion of royalists. Because the Ozma was deposed by the wizard, there is a group of people who are royalists who want to bring back the Ozma and get rid of the wizard. But that, for now at least, that group of people is pretty quiet and rare. They're not like a super prominent. Loud.
We haven't met anybody. I don't think.
Well, her dad. We find out that when he sends the shoes, I believe it's that time he sends the shoes, we get a letter that Frex is taking a hunger strike in order.
Oh, that's right.
In order for the return of the Ozma or something.
Of the Ozma.
So he is, I think that is like the first hint of like a new resurging royalist movement, maybe, is that he.
I think. If it's in that scene or maybe a later scene where I think Madame Morrible has a line that I really liked that was something like, the fact that the Ozma died under house arrest was just a coincidence.
Yes. Yeah, because he was deposed. The Ozma was deposed, and then the wizard like locked him in house arrest, and then just like took over.
Yeah,
and it wasn't even the Ozma; it was the Ozma regent. To be fair,
yes,
they specifically say it was essentially Denethor, like a pretender to the throne. But he ended up dying, and that's when the wizard took power. And so like that was kind of how the wizard was able to swing it, is that it wasn't like the true Ozma; it was like an Ozma regent. So,
because the actual Ozma is a baby.
Yes,
here, which fits with the lore of the marvelous Land of Oz, which I was really happy I read recently.
Yeah. A specific line that is in the book that I really liked, and that this book actually has a lot of kind of relevant political language and discussions in it, which is.
So I think the context of this,
I don't even know if I wrote it down,
was that Glinda asked Elphaba about like her childhood.
Yes.
And she's talking about how they spent all of this time basically as missionaries in Quadling country.
Yes.
Which is why she knows exactly what went on there.
Yeah.
And she's telling Glinda about like what the wizard did to the Quadling country.
Yes, you're right.
And Glinda's like, stop talking about politics. I asked about your childhood.
Yes. And Elphaba responds to her, well, that's it. That's all part of it. You can't divorce your particulars from politics. And it is the thing that it is a constant discussion point and argument, probably going back forever, is the idea of like, look, everything's political. Like her upbringing, her childhood, the way her childhood was shaped was entirely shaped by politics. It makes no sense to talk about her life absent politics, because it completely influenced the direction and trajectory of her entire life, because the wizard came in and killed all the her life is, it makes no sense to talk about her life without politics, because politics is such a huge part of who she is and it's shaped who she became. I like that she gets to be that voice for Glinda, and is kind of the person who she kind of radical. I mean, that is the story, is that she's the person who helps radicalize Glinda ultimately. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is that Shiz operates like Oxford in the book. At least I assume that's the idea. And I don't know enough about how that all works, but there are different colleges within Shiz, similar to Oxford, where like Oxford is the overall university, but then there's like Trinity College and blah, blah, blah. There's all the different colleges within Oxford. Shiz is similar, where there's like Craig Hall, however you pronounce it, which is where Glinda and Elphaba study.
That's the girls.
The all-girls school. And that was the other thing, is that the better colleges at Shiz are still male only, which I thought none of that comes up in the book. or in the movie. Yeah, there's still sex segregation in the world of the book. And Glinda mentions that she's the first girl from her area to be accepted to Shiz because, again, even though she is a little bit wealthier and stuff like that, she still apparently comes from a less prestigious area part of Gillikin than other people. A change that I like in the book, or it's not a change in the book, but a change that the movie makes that I think I prefer in the book is that in the movie, Elphaba shows up. She is like escorting Nessa Rose, who is starting as a student. And then her dad like asks her to like help make sure she gets settled in. And then the whole thing goes down where she does magic.
And she ends up getting accepted as a student.
And Morrible like drags her in. In the book, Elphaba is just a student at Shiz. She just comes as a student.
And she then goes there first because she's older.
Because she's older than Nessa Rose, which makes sense which is the same in the book and the movie, where she's the older sister of Nessa Rose. And I liked that. The movie's version of it's fine too. It creates it also helps establish like the dynamic between her and her father more, that like he kind of assumed like he didn't let her go to school or something like that. So it adds a little bit of character dynamic to them. But I do like the idea that it's like, yeah, no, she's just a student there. And then Nessa Rose shows up later as the next year when it's her turn to age into the program or whatever.
I thought it was really interesting that the characters, both the ones that we like know from the movie and from the musical, and also some other characters, they're like a crew. They're like college friends.
Yes.
And I was not expecting everyone to legitimately be friends.
Yes.
But like Glinda and Elphaba and Bach and later on Fiyero, and then there's another guy named Averick. Tibbet and something else, these other two guys, and then sometimes Glinda's friends, Shen and Fanny
sometimes
also hang out with them. But I thought it was really fun, and it reminded me of college in a way that made me feel like a little bittersweet.
I completely agree. I was not expecting it. That's what I mentioned. That's what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned that this was much more of a college book than I was expecting, is that it very much is trading on the emotions and the experiences of being in college.
Yeah.
And the experience of finding new friends and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and they like have this particular like tea room that they all hang out at and they drink tea together.
Yeah, and they even have their own name. Well, I don't know if the book refers to them as the something circle.
Yeah, the title of the chapter is like the Charmed Circle, or something like that.
But there was this great little passage that I wanted to read that is about their friend group that I thought was really interesting. The boys still weren't allowed access to Craig Hall, nor the girls to the boys' schools, but the city center area of Shiz became an extension of the parlors and lecture halls in which they were allowed to mingle. On a midweek afternoon or on a weekend morning, they would meet by the canal with a bottle of wine, or in a cafe or student watering hole, or they would walk about and discuss the fine points of Shiz architecture, or they would laugh about the excesses of their teachers. Bach and Averick, Elphaba and Nessa Rose, and with Nanny, Glinda, and sometimes Fanny and Shin and Mila, and sometimes Crope and Tibbet, and Crope brought Fiyero along and introduced him, which frosted Tibbet for a week or so, until the evening that Fiyero said in his shy, formal way, "Of course, I have been married for some time. We marry young in the Vinkus." The others were agog at the notion and felt juvenile. To be sure, Elphaba and Averick needled each other mercilessly. Nessa Rose tried everyone's patience with her religious rantings. Crope's and Tibbet's stream of saucy remarks got them dumped in the canal more than once, but Bach was relieved to find that his crush on Glinda was lifting somewhat. She sat on the edge of the picnic basket with the look of self-reliance, and she diverted conversation away from herself. He had loved the girl who had loved the glamour in herself, and that girl seemed to have disappeared, but he was happy to have Glinda as a friend. Well, in a nutshell, he had loved Glinda, and this was now Glinda, or he had loved Galinda, and this was now Glinda, someone he could no longer quite figure out. Case closed. It was a charmed circle. But again, just that dynamic of like all of those weird different friends that you have in college and kind of the way you interact. And yeah, I was not expecting this book to kind of delve into that in the way it did. And then it very much clearly, the second half is about the kind of different paths you guys take after college, which I thought was also very compelling. Again, not having read the second half yet, but knowing roughly where it goes from the musical. I agree. I thought that was all great. And like the scene in the book of them sneaking out, or in the movie, of them sneaking out to go to the Ozdust ballroom does capture a little bit
of
that like college, like when they're sailing on the boat and they're all like, there's a little bit of that, but that energy is prolific throughout the first half of the book, and is very compelling for somebody who went to college, you know, and has had that experience. And it was, kind of bittersweet and nostalgic in a way that I really enjoyed. Speaking of the Ozdust Ballroom, this is a kind of minor complaint in the movie. I've always thought it was very silly that Morrible shows up to the Ozdust Ballroom to give Glinda the wand.
It's very silly. Like, it's really silly.
And she has a line like, Elphaba said I had to do it tonight, so you got dressed up and went to you knew they were there. Like, what?
And also, like, they very explicitly are like, they're not supposed to be there,
but she doesn't care. And it's all a little like, okay, sure, you just had to have that happen right before the hat scene so that we could create the tension,
so that Glinda feels bad.
Yeah, and it's a little clunky in a way that is like, whatever. And the book doesn't do that at all. That whole scene's not in there, so it's just. Anyways, this is a little thing. I've always thought that particular scene was a little strange.
The scene with the lion cub, I thought was like way more horrific in the book.
Yes,
they specifically ask about its mother, and the professor's very kind of evasive about it, and then is like, well, let's just say the mother met with an untimely demise or something like that, and then literally is like. Gonna attempt to give this baby lion like a lobotomy,
essentially a lobotomy, or like electric shock therapy, or
like in front of this class. And it was also interesting to me how, you know, as opposed to the movie, everyone is horrified by this.
Yeah,
not just Elphaba, and she isn't even the one who rescues the cub.
Yeah, I had the exact same note,
and I'm really interested to see where that goes, if anywhere.
I had the exact same note. Is that I actually like that more students are kind of outraged in the book, and there seems to be a broader sentiment of like, what the fuck is this shit? And I do understand why they have Elphaba be the person who saves the cub.
I totally get it.
In the musical, like, that makes sense. But I did think it was interesting. Yeah, in the movie or in the book, it's just two random other girls run up and grab the cub and run off. And there's not anything where the class falls asleep. They literally just grab the cub and run away. And we never find out what happened after that. But I thought that was interesting. And I am interested to see how that plays out later, because it does. There is an element of that makes it a little tougher to see how, and I'm not saying impossible, but I'll be interested to see how Elphaba becomes the villain in the second half, when seemingly there's a pretty large swell of support within the student body and people for her side, her argument. I'm interested whereas in the movie, it makes more sense that she's like the only person who cares about this. Seemingly everybody else is like, well, this is whatever. It's just kind of, they're like disinterested and like, because they benefit from the privilege and it
doesn't affect them.
It's a kind of that classic thing. And so it makes more sense then for them like for her to be turned into this villain in all of their eyes, because they never really like agreed with her anyways, or like cared about what she cared about. Whereas in the book, everybody seems to agree. Not everybody. Yeah, a lot of people seem to agree.
They all kind of seem to be on the same page.
Yeah. And especially within their Charmed Circle friend group, they're all like kind of like working together to help do this. Some of them are more interested in it than others, is the idea. Like Crope and Tibbet are helping, but they're not like super into the like social justice aspect of it necessarily. It's just more like something to do for them or whatever. But I'm very interested to see where that all goes in the second half.
That's actually my next note, is about, so Dr. Dillamond in the book is doing, like you mentioned, this research to try to figure out what the difference is between capital A animals and lowercase a animals. And basically the whole group kind of becomes embroiled in like helping him in his mission.
Yeah, Elphaba slowly recruits everybody else to kind of help.
Because like she specifically has been employed as like his student assistant for the summer. And Bach is also has a summer job like working in one of the libraries. And it's a library that neither Elphaba nor Dillamond are allowed.
It's a men's only library. Or it's in the men's only school,
So he like sneaks research material to them. And I don't know, I thought the whole thing was like really interesting and compelling.
No, I agree completely. I absolutely agree. I also thought that because we also then find out that ultimately like and I guess we might get to it later, but the revelation that Dillamond is coming to is that there is no difference, that there's, or at least there's no physical difference. And I'm sure that'll get explored more in the second half probably, because we don't really know. Elphaba is going to continue his research, but that's where the book kind of stopped, where we stopped in the book. But it seems the implication is that there is no difference other than maybe like upbringing or something
Yeah.
like that. There's something going on early in their life that maybe causes that change, but physically there's not really a difference. And I think we're going for a thing of like, there's racism thing of like, there's no difference between the races scientifically, really. Like there are differences culturally and stuff, but there's not a difference. Like races aren't real in the same way that we traditionally thought they were.
Yeah.
One of the things during that research that I thought was interesting is that Bach finds a drawing in a book or something of a Cumbric witch, which is this thing they mentioned several times, which is this old pagan witch or something like that, or type of pagan witch, I think is the implication. I don't know exactly what a Cumbric witch is, and they don't really go into explicit detail.
Yeah, they don't really explain exactly, but it is something. It's something that's more
like
aligned with like the old
witch.
pagan belief system.
And he sees this drawing of one who is nursing some weird creature thing. I don't know what it's supposed to be necessarily, but it's like this strange, like instead it kind of looks like a sea anemone, I think, or something like that. But in this drawing, she is wearing silver shoes and clicking her heels together. And I was like, holy shit, we got like an MCU lore drop, like the shoes in this ancient scroll, like this Cumbric witch. And now we discussed the other day, we're still not sure if the implication is those are the same silver slippers that Nessa Rose gets later and thus Dorothy gets eventually, or if they're just supposed to be the same kind of thing, like
like the same type of enchanted shoe.
Yes, or what's going on there. We're not sure yet, because when we find out later where Nessa Rose got the shoes from, it's like maybe we don't know, but we'll talk about that more later. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting that he sees the drawing of this ancient drawing with her wearing the shoes. I was like, oh wow, it goes way back. It's not in the movie. We'll talk about it later. Dr. Dilliman is killed in the book.
Yes.
He is murdered. And maybe he is in the second half of the musical. I can't remember. Is he?
I don't remember.
No, he shows back up later.
He shows back up.
He's like a prisoner.
I don't think it's implied that he's killed.
He gets murdered in the book. And the reason he gets murdered is that he was right on the precipice of a discovery. And we find out eventually that Madame Morrible is involved in all of this and blah, blah, blah.
But they try to pass it off as an accident. And right before he was murdered, Amma Clutch, who is, we've not even mentioned Amma Clutch yet. She's Glinda's chaperone.
And they're all called Ammas.
Yes.
Which was that, we were trying to figure out if
that threw me for a loop because we meet her first, and I thought Amma was just her name. Yes. And then when Glinda shows up at Shiz, all of the other girls also have Ammas.
With different last names.
Yeah, and I was like, it's like
okay,
it's a title, sure.
But Amma Clutch sees something going down on at Dr. Dilliman's like office or whatever, and goes down there to like see what's going on,
to like
and
check on him.
Never comes back. They discover her the next day. She's in the hospital and she has lost her mind.
Yeah.
She's like gone crazy. And there's this thing where Glinda had used that as a lie earlier in the book in order to explain why she couldn't be in a dorm with other students. She had lied to Madame Morrible.
She needed a private room.
Yes, she had lied to Madame Morrible and said that Amma Clutch couldn't oversee a bunch of girls because she like loses her mind sometimes.
Yes.
And she's like she's not all there basically.
Yeah. But this was a fictitious thing that Glinda
she
invented.
made up in order to try to get a private room, and it's why she ends up getting stuck in a room with Elphaba. And I thought it was interesting fun that Madame Morrible then uses Glinda's lie against her when Amma Clutch loses her mind, seemingly, probably from some spell that Madame Morrible cast on her. But she goes, oh, well, she must have fully lost it, like you said. Like, that's what's going on here. And it is, I liked that a lot. So then eventually they go to visit Amma Clutch, who is passing away. She's been in the hospital for months or I don't know how long at this point, and she is dying. And they go in, and Glinda is able to briefly like cast a spell on her to bring her
out.
back.
She brings her out of it a little bit.
But there was this great moment right before she cast a spell that I really enjoyed, where they're going in to talk to her, and it's just Elphaba and Glinda is like, "Oh, this is all my fault." Oh, she's like beating herself up because she's like blaming herself for what happened to Amma Clutch. And she goes, "This is all my fault."
At this point, she thinks that she somehow manifested this condition.
Oh, do you think that?
I thought that.
I didn't think that. I just thought she was just kind of being like,
because she made it up.
Yes.
And so she thinks she somehow, because she is studying sorcery, she thinks she somehow like made this happen by like inventing it.
Okay. That was not how I read this, but fair enough. But anyways, she's like, it's all my fault. And Elphaba responds to her, oh, stop. It is. I'm not arguing that. See, this is that. I didn't read it that way. I read it as Glinda is saying, this is all my fault. Like, her being able to use this lie against me is all my fault. And like, that we can't do anything about it is because of my lie. Anyways, I didn't interpret it as her thinking literally that but maybe, I don't.
I think there was a line about that,
Okay.
like specifically about that.
Elphaba says to her, oh, stop. It is. I'm not arguing that. I just mean cut yourself out of the conversation. This is her death, not your interview with the unnamed god. And I love that she just berates her for like, hey, she's dying. You don't spend this time, beating yourself up and like being all self-pitying about this. She's the one dying. Get over yourself.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. But they do briefly manage to talk to her, and she basically tells them that Grammatic, who is Madame Morrible's clockwork servant,
like TikTok from Return to Oz,
is the one who killed Dr. Dilliman. We also have this thing that happens in the book that it's not in the movie, and I thought could have helped maybe a little bit, where we actually get a scene where Madame Morrible recruits Elphaba, Glinda, and Nessa Rose as like generals for the wizard. This is where she creates the witch. I was trying to remember what the name of what Nick Fury calls the Avengers. It's not project. He's got some initiative. The Avengers initiative. This is the witch initiative for the wizard, where she's recruiting these 3 witches in order to be like emissaries for the wizard and to help keep peace in the different regions or whatever. And she says she's going to put a different one in each of the 4 regions, except for Vinkus, because they plan to just kill everybody in Vinkus or something.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
She's literally like, oh, I'm not worried about Vinkus because we're going to kill everybody there.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Like, okay.
And I was like, this seems like a terrible choice to try to recruit Elphaba specifically Elphaba into this.
Elphaba seems like not, I don't know. This scene really threw me.
Well, because there's the added layer of, she says, you have till next semester to decide.
Yeah.
And there's this, it's kind of unclear in the book, but the implication is that she casts some sort of spell on them.
Yes.
That essentially keeps them from discussing it with each other. That she says, if you try to discuss it with each other, you'll have like a headache and you'll like forget or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of muddles their own memory of it, like with themselves. Like later, Glinda is thinking about it, and she like can remember the conversation, but she can't quite remember the exact content of what was said, and she interprets it more as like a prophecy or like an acknowledgement of her own potential, and it becomes this weird muddled thing where I think what we're supposed to imply is that Morrible did some kind of like some sort of charm or something where she was able to have this conversation with them, but it like is muddy enough in their own heads that they can't like properly reason through it or something like that.
Yeah, I do think that is what's supposed to have happened.
Yeah.
But it also, and maybe we'll learn more about this in the second half of the book, I felt like it seemed like it affected Elphaba less than it did Glinda.
Yeah. And maybe I think it's probably supposed to be kind of just broadly allegorical which was similar to what we get in the movie, where Elphaba is more influenced by the promise of power, of being important, of being influential.
Glinda is.
Did I say Elphaba? Yeah. Sorry. Glinda is more
she's more easily swayed
by like the promise of power, the promise of influence, the promise of import. Whereas Elphaba, because of her upbringing, I think is less likely to be swayed by that. And I think we're supposed to kind of like, yes, she casts a spell, but it's supposed to kind of broadly be an allegory for just like, again, the different paths people go on in life after college. The powers that be are kind of promising these things to them, and the promises that they're offering aren't super clear, and like what even your job would be is not super clear, and you're not, but it's like, what decision do you make? What path do you take? Like Elphaba is not as swayed by these promises from this rich, powerful part of systemic power, which Madame Morrible ultimately ends up being. Whereas Glinda is more easily kind of influenced by this because she has those aspirations for power and influence and all that sort of stuff. And then Nessa Rose, we'll see where that all goes eventually.
Yeah.
But hers, I think, is probably more so she's just she's easily swayed by authority because she's very religious and just like, so she's, that sort of thing. Anyways, I thought it was interesting. It's a little confusing. I kind of withholding judgment on it until the second half of the book to see what happens with it. But
yeah, it is interesting. It does feel like a bad choice to try to recruit Elphaba specifically.
That was my thought, yes.
Like first act musical Elphaba, sure,
yes.
But book Elphaba is already radicalized against the wizard.
Yes.
So like, why is she trying?
Why does she think? And it doesn't seem, and it seems like Marable's aware.
Yeah.
Because she like constantly questions them about like their allegiances and stuff.
Yeah.
Like when at one point they get the gift with the shoes. And there's a letter about the royalist thing that her dad's doing. And so Marable like questions them about their royalist. Are they secretly royalists or whatever? And Elphaba's like, no, I don't give a shit about that. And Nessa Rose is like, no, the unnamed god is the one true authority, so like there is that element of it. Yeah, I don't know. I like I said, I thought it was interesting. I like it.
Coming back around to something from the movie. Controversial opinion, question mark?
I don't know.
I feel like I don't know if this is a controversial opinion necessarily. I feel like it might be possibly among like OG musical fans. I think the Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth cameo is a little too much.
See, I like agree.
It's fun.
Yeah.
But
my note is just that it's a bit long.
Yeah, it goes on.
It's a bit long, and I remember the first time we watched it in theaters, I had the same reaction. I legitimately hate having Idina Menzel do the Defying Gravity run in her musical number like 20 minutes before the Defying Gravity number it just like I'm like that moment that like my eyes like rolled out of my head in that moment. I actually like their cameo in the way they do it. It should have just been half the length it was, and that she should not have sung part of Defying Gravity. It's like, what are we doing?
I understand the impulse.
Yes.
I understand. I totally get the impulse. They should have ignored that impulse.
Yes. Yeah. Again, the idea is there. I like that, like, because this is like the same thing they did in like, and it's probably why they did this. It's the Thor Ragnarok cameos, where they have everybody pretending to be the characters, and that was like Matt Damon and I can't remember who else, but it's all these like big name actors doing like this staged production of meta thing of the movie you're watching. And so like it is interesting. Like I don't dislike the cameo. Like I said, I just that your point exactly. It's too long, and don't have her sing Defying Gravity right before Defying Gravity. It's dumb.
Kind of already talked about all of the like weird creation stories in the book and the Ozma line.
Yeah.
I did want to call out a couple of specific things. One of which is that in the book, the current Ozma is called Ozma Tippetarius, which I took as a nod to that being the Ozma who gets transformed into the boy Tip, who gets reinstated during the events of the Marvelous Land of Oz.
Yeah.
Again, so happy I read those books.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I caught so many more things than I think I would have otherwise.
I think even having just talked about it helped me a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I did appreciate in the movie was the implication, which I don't think comes from the musical. Because the movie, I'm pretty sure, added the whole thing with Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth. That's all addition. Yeah. But within that little play, they talk about how it was foretold that someone would arise who could read the Grimoire, which we find out later Elphaba can. Yeah. So I did appreciate the implication that actually Elphaba is supposed to be the savior of Oz. Mm-hmm. And the wizard just got there first and like tricked them all. Yeah, pretended to be the savior.
Yeah.
But they do go to see the wizard in the book. Elphaba and Glinda do, and a line. It's a little bit different from what happens in the movie, but a line specifically that I really liked when they're talking to him. Glinda says, "Scale down, Elfie. You're making him mad." To which Elphaba responds, "So what? I'm mad." And I was like, hell yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought that was great. I also made a note of that line. And I do think the movie is trying to capture a little bit of that, because right before they go into the room to talk to the wizard, in the movie, there's a line in the movie where Elphaba says, like, don't be afraid, or something. As they're like walking in, she like squeezes her hand and says, don't be afraid. And Elphaba says, I'm not afraid. It's the wizard that should be afraid of me. Or something.
I think that's a little later on. I think that's like right, like in the midst of defying gravity.
Oh, is it?
Or like right before it.
Yeah, I think you're right. But point being that moment kind of captures that.
Yeah, it's
energy
it's a similar
scene.
energy.
But I did really like that whole scene, her exchange where she just like reads him to filth and is like, "Hey, you asshole, do something," and he's like, "No." And
yeah,
it is interesting that he just lets them leave in the book, and they just leave.
They just go.
I was like, all right.
They also don't see the man behind the curtain. In the book.
Yes, yeah, they just talk to the
glowing skeleton.
The glowing skeleton, which we'll talk about. My final note here for better in the book is that in the movie, I've never, and in the musical for that matter, I've always felt like them immediately showing Elphaba the Grimoire and her immediately reading it and casting some random spell, and it making the monkeys fly just never made a ton of sense to me. Like it felt like we were missing steps there. So I don't know, like something about the way that all plays out just feels like oddly rushed, or like we're skipping a beat or something. I don't know. I
agree with you. I think the thing we're supposed to infer is that she does have this like natural like talent for it, or like, I mean, in the movie, they explicitly imply that she's like the only one, prophecy foretold that she can read this.
And like, I assumed the idea is that she's kind of like ends up almost like possessed by, not possessed, but like the power of the book, the magic of the power of the book, that allure, like kind of draws her to just read it and do this spell, even though like she doesn't know what it does. And you know what I mean? It's just like,
well, and I also think that maybe we're supposed to infer that there's like, this is like the thing that she's been missing to help her control her powers, because throughout the movie and the musical, one of the elements, which is not a thing in the book, is that she does have.
Well, maybe we'll talk about.
Maybe she does, but she does have these magical powers that she like can't control, and they like bubble over when she's feeling particularly emotional. But then when she reads the spell from the Grimoire, she's able to kind of actually harness that power.
Yeah.
But I do think that you could also read the kind of like. Now, obviously, the speed with which this progresses is born out of necessity. You know, you're telling a 3-hour stage show.
Yeah.
But also, I think you could read it as the wizard and Morrible maybe getting a little too big for their britches. And instead of like easing Elphaba into their viewpoint, they push her into the deep end, which does not go well for them.
Yeah, and that's fair. That can make sense. Yeah, because the point of that was that I actually kind of like in the book that he just lets them leave, and then they leave, and then she decides that, like.
Well, because at that point, he has no reason to be threatened.
Yeah, he has no.
They're just a couple of kids.
Yeah, and I liked that. Like I said, I liked that in the book, because I've always thought that scene in the movie and the musical was just a little like, okay, she's just reading the spell. She doesn't know what it does. They want spies. Why do they want to create these flying monkeys? It's just like a little like, I don't know, easy. It's just like a little like, we're just like making everything kind of happen here at the end to like launch off to our second half of the thing in a way that just felt, I don't know, again, clunky and easy in a way that just never quite made sense to me. So I liked how the book handles it. But that being said, we'll get into it here in the next section. I can't complain, because it leads to the end of the first act of the musical and the end of this movie, which are fantastic, and we're going to talk about at length in what we thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
The book does have a kind of, I would say, a mild nonlinear structure.
At least so far, yeah.
Where we open with a prologue, and we see Elphaba watching Dorothy and company as they're like on the road to see the wizard. And then we jump back to the beginning of her story, similar to how we do in the movie. But I like the movie's take better. I think that starting with right after she melts,
Yes.
quote unquote, is a really good place to begin. It evokes a memorable scene from the 1939 film, and it's also a good pretext for diving into her life story.
As a classic, that's how you start a biopic. Start on their death, flashback, where did they come from? That's, it's Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
That's literally Citizen Kane. It's Rosebud. So I'm just going to put this note here because it's maybe the most obvious note, which is just the music. Like, obviously, all of the music. I like it a lot. It's my kind of musical music. It is big soaring melodies and choruses and big dramatic moments, and it's basic bitch musical music, and it's my thing.
And the first act of this show in particular, the second act goes a little downhill for me music wise.
There's songs I like. There's
songs
stuff I like,
but particularly the first act of this musical
is nonstop.
Banger after banger after banger.
Every single number is great. Like, literally every single one of them is fantastic. Yeah, and so it's just, it's like I said, and we're going to go into each one, or not each one, but we'll hit some other highlights as we go. But I was just going to put it at the front. The book doesn't have any music in it. Not explicitly in the same way. In the same way, the book doesn't really have any music in it, and so the music in the movie and for that matter, I think the movie music is pretty good. A pretty good version of the music. They didn't do anything too. It's just basically the musicals. Arrangements,
and I think it really works
heightened.
that they did not go crazy trying to update things or change things or what have you.
They took some liberties at times, with, especially Defying Gravity has some specific moments that they add for heightened dramatism, for heightened drama. But largely, the music sounds like it does if you're going to watch the musical. So.
Yeah. I appreciate that the movie added more talking animals.
Yeah.
Because Dillamond is really the only one that we interact with in a meaningful way in the book, at least so far. And in the stage show. He's really the only one in the stage show, which is probably a practical costuming choice, to be fair.
As much as anything.
But I liked that the movie was okay, we have the technology. We can do more talking animals.
Yeah. Which brought me to one specific joke in the movie that made me chuckle, where it's when Dillamond is meeting in that late night group with all the other talking animals, and one of them says, I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and somebody goes, a deer? It's a dumb joke, but it made me laugh. I appreciate the movie and the musical, I guess, to some extent, but really the movie for sure. I think maybe does this more than, I don't know. I would have to remember the specifics of the musical. I think the movie leans into this more than my memory from the musical of kind of the disability advocacy that the movie does with Nessa. Specifically, but specifically in relation to this movie does things about making it clear that she doesn't need help in the ways the movie doesn't let people be patronizing or paternalistic to her in a way that very often characters in wheelchairs are treated in media. Yeah. And so I appreciate that.
And the specific call out of people grabbing her chair and moving her around and don't fucking do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. And I appreciated the movie doing that because like I said, I don't remember if the musical really does any of that. And then the book obviously doesn't at all, which we'll talk about because they don't have the same disability in the book as she does in the movie. So
I love the first interaction between Galinda and Elphaba in the movie. Where she comes in and Galinda is well, when I am a sorcerer,
yes, I
would be so happy to help you with your problem.
Yes. Yeah, and we'll talk. I have another note about that in a second I want to talk about, but yeah.
There's a little moment in the movie after Elphaba does her accidental magic where there's this big kind of stone relief or more mural or something of the wizard, and it falls away to reveal that it has covered up a mural of animal professors. Yeah. And I thought that was a great little foreshadowing moment.
Perfect little moment to kind of set up what's going on without
it's kind of baby's first foreshadowing, but it's good.
But it's good, and it doesn't spend a bunch of time. We don't get it is baby's first foreshadowing, but what it doesn't do is it fights the urge to cut to somebody going, what's that? Is that an animal? Why is there an animal mural under the, you know what I mean? It doesn't put a hat on a hat. It shows it and then it just moves on.
I do love an enemies to friends arc, which the movie leans into. That was far less prevalent in the book than I thought it would be.
Yeah, because they become friends pretty quickly.
Yeah, that not super close friends
No.
right away, but they're like generally fine with
Yes.
each other right off the bat.
They don't have nearly as much. They don't become friends. They become friends probably around the same speed as they do in the book and in the movie, but their relationship is not as contentious in the book as it is in the movie.
Yes.
To start with, they're not enemies to friends. It's more like ignore each other to friends in the book.
I thought the animals should be seen and not heard moment is more dramatic and ominous in the movie.
I would agree with that. I like the way they utilized that line in the movie because that is in the book, but I really like the poetry scene in the book for several different reasons. So where that line occurs in the book is that Madame Morrible has a poetry reading night.
Yeah.
Where she goes and she like reads a bunch.
Yeah, she hosts a salon, basically.
She hosts a salon where she reads this new style of poetry, which I can't remember what they're called now. But she has this poetry reading, and she immediately, first thing, reads a poem about how animals should be seen and not heard. Like, that is the final line of the poem. Dillamond is there for this. He is offended and storms out.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. And I love that she has this great line. It's not a great line, but it's a great line in the book where she says, one expects poetry, if it is poetry, to offend. It is the right of art. And you immediately realize who Madame Morrible is. And there's this incredible exchange in the book right after that then that goes on from there where Elphaba like calls this out because there's like all these people there. And Elphaba calls out like, what the hell is that? What was that poem? Madame Morrible, if you please, said Elphaba, we never had an opportunity to discuss the quells that you recited in the parlor last week. This is later, but discuss, said Madame Morrible with a generous though shooing wave of bangled hands. Well, Dr. Dillamond seemed to think that they were in questionable taste given the bans on animal mobility. Dr. Dillamond, alas, said Madame Morrible, is a doctor. He is not a poet. He is also a goat, and I might ask you girls if we have ever had a great goat sonneteer or balladeer. Alas, dear Miss Elphaba, Dr. Dillamond doesn't understand the poetic convention of irony. Would you like to define irony for the class, please? I don't believe I can, madam. Irony, some say, is the art of juxtaposing incongruous parts. One needs a knowing distance. Irony presupposes detachment, which, alas, in the case of animal rights, we may forgive Dr. Dillamond for being without. So that phrase that he objected to, animals should be seen and not heard, that was ironic, continued Elphaba, studying her papers and not looking at Madame Morrible. Galinda and her classmates were enthralled, for it was clear that each of the females at opposite ends of the rooms would have enjoyed seeing the other crumple in a sudden attack of the spleen. One could consider it in an ironic mode if one chose, said Madame Morrible. How do you choose? Said Elphaba. How impertinent, said Madame Morrible. Well, I don't mean impertinence. I'm trying to learn. If anyone thought that statement was true, then isn't it in conflict with the boring bossy bit that precedes it? It's just argument and conclusion, and I don't see the irony. You don't see much, Miss Elphaba. And so I really liked that exchange because it does kind of capture a very ever-present, frustrating proclivity type of person, especially for people generally on the right and people in favor of authoritarianism and fascism and shit like that, which is to claim that you just don't get it. You don't get the irony of it. It's a joke. It was just a joke. Don't you get that it was just a joke? And she's like, well, what's the fucking joke then? Like, what's the irony? Like, what are you talking about? It's ironic. And he's like, well, Dillamond is too, and like that same thing. It's like, well, you know, Dillamond couldn't understand it because he's too close to it. He's got too much personal attachments. But me, an enlightened person who doesn't have these kind of personal hangups with it, is able to appreciate and it's just, oh God, it's so, I was like, holy shit, yeah, nothing ever changes. Like I said, this is written in the 90s, and that has been going on long before the 90s. It's just, it's so funny that type of person has been a villain in stories forever, and it just will never change, apparently.
Generally, I think it'll probably be a good call to combine Fiyero and Averick.
Yeah.
Assuming this is what the musical/movie did.
Yes.
I'm assuming that's what happened. I did.
That does seem like the case, yeah.
I did see in the movie's credits that there's a character named Averick, but I didn't recognize him, and so I think that's just like an Easter egg for people who read the book.
And speaking of Fiyero, I think Jonathan Bailey is fantastic.
Oh yeah, he's great.
And so I really enjoy his character. I would put that as better in the movie. I like the book's shy, naive Fiyero, who's a married little prince or whatever.
We don't really know him yet.
Not yet. Yeah, he's been very briefly in the book and hasn't really done much. So I'm interested to see where he goes, what he becomes. I assume it's going to be about him kind of growing into his, or like he starts out as kind of a naive, sheltered little prince, and then it's probably going to be about him becoming radicalized in the same way that Glinda does, or something like that would be my thought. Maybe, I don't know. I am interested to see. But that being said, I like the bold, like self-assured, cocksure Fiyero of the musical and the movie. And I also think, depending on how this whole thing goes, having more, especially in the book, having more, because I have no idea where their relationship stuff goes in the book. Having more of Fiyero and Elphaba earlier in the film, because again, they barely interact in the first half of the book, I think it makes sense if the book story goes a similar place to the musical.
Given where we know their relationship goes in the musical, it makes sense for them to have more interaction in the first half.
But if the book doesn't do that, then who knows? Yeah.
You mentioned the music earlier, and I want to specifically call out how much I adore the choreography for both What Is This Feeling and Dancing Through Life. Because whoever came up with the rotating library set piece concept deserves an award.
100%. Yeah. The Dancing Through Life sequence is so fun. And I know people complain about the lighting in that scene. I actually like it. I actually think it works.
I think people complaining about the lighting in that scene are wrong.
I get what people are complaining about, but it's because you get the blown out windows. And people complain about how like it's so bright coming through. I think it completely works in that scene. It also creates this feeling of like they're these sheltered like college kids talking about life in this library in a university, and the world outside is so bright you can't, like, there's so much beyond the walls of this library and the walls of this school that they don't really even understand yet. And I think having that, all of that light shining through and blasting through the windows just creates this like kind of idyllic idea of like what the world is like out there. And again, that dancing through life thing and like kind of moving through life in this overly carefree kind of way. I think having that, the way they light that scene, there's probably things I would change, and you could probably show me a similar version lit slightly differently and color graded slightly differently that I would like slightly more, but I think the movie works overall. I like the silhouette look that you get when the light coming through the window a lot of the times. And as to your point, the bookcases, the rotating bookcase set piece thing is just very cool, very well done. I like the way they shoot it. There's that really cool shot where the camera does this flip as a guy like jumps over the kid. A lot of really cool stuff in there. I've seen people complain about this musical movie as not being a very good musical movie, like the way it's shot and the choreography. I've seen people and the music. I've seen people
with that,
and I completely disagree with that. I've seen people say like it's not actually, and I don't. There, like I said, there's some things I don't. Even the color grading, people complain about the color grading in this movie. I think it broadly works in the movie. Like people talk about like, well, it's not like it's so gray and flat compared to like kind of what you would maybe expect it to be, but it's not really. Like it's very colorful at times in ways that work. It's going for a pastel color palette. Like it's definitely going for a more muted. It's not going for Technicolor. It is like a pastel-y themed like color palette, but it's very colorful in a way. I don't know. I don't watch the movie and go, "Oh, this movie's gray and ugly." Like, you know what I mean?
No, I don't either. And I definitely understand maybe why people would want Technicolor, because I also like Technicolor. Like it looks cool. Yeah. And we just can't do it anymore. But I also think that maybe a problem that we have with like the modern movie musical is that I think people are very wont to compare them to like the golden age of the movie musical. And I think maybe we should stop doing that. Yeah. And just kind of let it be its own thing. Yeah. I
mean, the form has changed. It would also, just making a musical that looked like, and now I don't know, I've heard people say, like the counterpoint I've heard people say to that is, go watch Steven Spielberg's West Side Story from like 2 years ago. Everything I've ever heard about that movie, everybody says like that is like the best musical that has come out in the last 20 years or something like that. And that it kind of puts all of these other musicals, I don't know, I haven't seen it, but that it does, it kind of lives up to the classic musicals from the 50s, the 60s, whatever. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but I have heard people at least say that. But anyways, I would agree with you. I think I think overall, I think this is a very effective and succeeds as a musical largely. Again, there's some moments here and there of stuff. The really the main one, and we'll get to that scene a little bit, is the scene with Fiyero and Elphaba in the woods. I don't love the way that looks, like the way that's lit and shot. But anyways, other than that, yeah.
I don't know if this is really a better in the movie because it's more like it's not really comparing it to the book. As much as I love the stage show, I think I never really got the Ozdust Ball scene between like Elphaba and Glenda until I was able to see the close-up emotions in the movie. Because I think like watching it from way back in the nosebleeds, it's just a little hard to parse the underlying emotions of what is going on in that scene.
We had that exact conversation after watching the musical. I think we had that conversation at some point about how seeing that scene in the film with the close-ups really allows you to recontextualize that scene when you can actually see the emotions that the characters are performing when it is tough when you're watching the musical from far away. A thing I will say that in the musical and the movie I just have here randomly that I've never really understood is Elphaba's motivation in that moment for like where she walks in front of everybody, takes the hat off, and then starts just like dancing. Like I never really understood her motivation in that moment.
I mean,
you know what I mean? Like I don't know.
I think we're just supposed to get that she's like she's showing them all how much she doesn't care,
which is what Glenda says.
But I do agree that it's kind of a strange.
It feels like a stretch.
Like it's hard to. I think it's easy for me to relate to the idea of like, oh, you fuckers are gonna laugh at me, I'm gonna be ridiculous. But it's hard for me to relate to the specific action of like setting the hat down and then dancing
doing
around
a weird dance. Yes, that is the part to me that I'm just like, why does she set the hat down? Yeah, it's just like it's like I don't know. It's whatever. It doesn't. I've always kind of found that moment a little awkward and confusing. That being said, the scene in the movie is the moment after that it leads to of Glenda coming up and sharing in that moment with her and supporting her in that moment is so beautifully shot and specifically acted in this scene that it has literally gotten me to tear up every time I've seen it. Even this third time, this is the third time I've seen the movie now. Even this time I teared up a little bit. Not as much, but like the first time we saw this in theaters, that whole scene, I was crying like the whole time. And it just got me really well because I just think it is brilliantly acted, brilliantly edited, and the shot choice of the moments of who they show when and how they reveal it's just beautiful. And I think it's so well done that it's probably like the best scene in the movie. I think arguably in a lot of ways there's other stuff that's really great, but I think it's maybe one of the most like well-crafted moments of the movie that I think perfectly, and I think to your point, it's elevated by the fact that it's a moment that if you've seen the musical, you've never really gotten to see in this context. Yeah. You've only ever gotten to see it, unless you had front row seats. You've
even front row seats.
Yes, even front row seats. But like, if you've watched a musical and a normal production, you've never really been able to see the emotion on each character's face during the scene and what they're going through in the way that it does in the movie. And it just adds so much to it that, it's great.
Immediately following that scene, then when they're back in their bedroom, Elphaba's palpable confusion about how to have a friend is so adorable. I think Cynthia Erivo does some really good, like, subtle acting in the start to that scene.
Yeah. No, yeah. I also really love in that scene where after they're telling secrets to each other and Elphaba like doesn't have a secret to tell her or whatever, and Glenda sulks and she walks over, stomps over at her bed and flops on the bed. And then Elphaba starts walking over and as she's walking over, you see Glenda like look back and then immediately stick her head. She's like looks back to see if Elphaba is watching her and then immediately sticks her head back down. Is a great little comedy beat. I don't know if that's in the musical or not. I don't remember. But it's a great comedy beat. If it's not in the musical, kudos on whoever came up with it.
I also really like Glinda immediately reassuring Elphaba that it's not her fault that Nessa Rose is in a wheelchair and that their mother died. Because that ends up being her secret, is
Yes.
that, like, oh, it's my fault that all these things happened. And I think it's, and Glinda is immediately like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And I think it's such a nice character moment for her to show that she actually is kind at heart, like, once you get past that facade.
Yeah.
Elphaba is nicknamed Alfie.
Yes.
Elfie.
Yeah.
In the book, although it seems to be like a childhood nickname.
Yeah.
But I like the choice of having Galinda give it to her.
It makes sense. Yeah. It works.
Dr. Dillamond. We mentioned that he is murdered in the book.
Yeah.
I do think that seeing him get, like, dragged off by the secret police is more impactful.
Yeah.
Than like, because
He just dies.
Yeah,
off
he
screen.
like dies off screen in the book.
Or off page.
Yeah, off page.
Yeah. However you want to say it. I have mixed feelings on this. I like the drama in the book of him being on the edge of this discovery, and then him being murdered, and this, like, and it being this kind of surprise miss. I don't know. It reminded me of a lot of, like, other books I've read as a kid, that I really enjoyed the kind of, like, it's not a murder mystery, but it
feels kind of murder mystery.
Yeah, in a way that I thought was fun and interesting, and then, like, Morrible lying about it and all that sort of stuff, and, like, them figuring out, like, doing some, like, reconnaissance and talking to Alma Clutch about what she saw, like, all of that is interesting and kind of fun little, like, mystery stuff. That being said, I agree with you that the moment in the movie of seeing him drug off by the secret police is probably a more effective visual for, like, communicating the point.
And I think probably more salient in this day and age.
Yes. A death off screen, while again, you could argue, well, he's dead, that's more dramatic, more impactful. Visually seeing him be drug out by secret police in front of everybody for the crime of being an animal is it's much more thematically resonant than just dying.
My opinion on this could change in the second half of the book. I'll have to see what happens. But I felt like movie Madame Morrible seems to be much better at manipulating people.
Yes.
We talked about her attempt to manipulate the girls in the book, which felt to me kind of ham-fisted. And I questioned, like we said, the decision to include Elphaba in that specifically.
Yeah.
But she seems to be a lot better at it in the movie.
Yes. That was on a similar note I had in the book. I was, like, interested to see where this went, or if I was crazy and if it was colored by the fact that I knew that Madame Morrible was evil because of the musical. Like,
right. But no, I think the book very clearly is painting her as a villain the whole time.
She's so clearly involved in Dillamond's murder and is so clearly evil from almost moment one that you meet her in the book. And I assumed the book knows this is obvious and that this isn't going to be, like, a reveal, you know, like I assume.
I assume that the book knows it's being obvious because she's painted as a villain in the same way that, like, the Harry Potter books paint people as villains.
Yes.
Where it's, like, very clear through, like, the way that the characters describe her and talk about her, that
like,
she's,
her features and all that. But then on top of that, just the things she does, like, the way she questions them about stuff. She's like,
very
similar
very
to, like,
clearly a villain.
Yes, it's very similar to, like, how Snape is coded in, like, the early Harry Potter books, where you're like, okay, like, this guy, and again, now there's obviously complication to that, but, like, the way he is presented as a character is similar to how she is presented, in the sense of, like, well, it's obviously this person is not on the up and up. And I think, again, to that point though, I think the book is, like, it's not supposed to be a reveal that, like, surprise.
I hope not,
because it is very, very
because
obvious.
if that becomes a surprise, that's gonna maybe change some of my thoughts about.
Well,
this
and
book.
surely not, because at this point they know she was like, it's
she's
literally
like working
have
with the
said
wizard,
that and that, like, Grommatic was involved in killing.
Yeah,
and then she later lies and says, like, oh no, Grommatic just found him. But yeah, it's obvious that she was involved.
Galinda does change her name to Glinda because of Dr. Dillamond in the book, although I think I like the context better in the movie, mostly because it's just kind of mentioned in the book, And the movie gives her like a whole, like a kind of more of a selfish pretext for doing it, which I feel like works with her arc.
So that's what I was gonna say, because I actually preferred it in the book. That it's the same thing in both, is that she changes it from Glinda to Glinda in honor of Dr. Dilliman.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in both. In the book, though, she's genuinely changing it because she feels awful about, and she genuinely is honoring Dr. Dilliman, and she's genuinely heartbroken about him being murdered and all this sort of stuff. In the movie, it is very clearly she is just doing it to virtue signal. Like, that is what she is. She is doing it in order to look good in front of everybody and to pull some of the spotlight onto herself, because Elphaba has all this spotlight right now for being summoned to see the wizard, and is also currently kind of seemingly maybe stealing Fiero from her. And so she's feeling very insecure. And so she has this moment where she can like, I can steal the spotlight back for myself. So she does this entirely for her own image and for selfish reasons. Whereas in the book, that is not the case.
Yeah.
That being said, and so I actually like that in the book, because she is this more interesting character, and she does have more, like, she is a good person. I assume what we're doing in the reason they made that change in the movie is because we have not finished her arc yet.
Yes.
Like, for the way that her character arc is paced in the films, you have to have her still be more selfish and more self-absorbed now, because she has to make the decision not to go with Elphaba at the end and to side with Morrible and the wizard, at least ostensibly side with them at least a little bit, you know what I mean? And so it makes sense for her to not have fully like bought into the movement and all of that sort of thing at this point in the movie. So I get it. It all works.
Yeah, it really does boil down to the difference in Galinda's character in the book versus the movie. I was actually fine with not seeing the philosophy club depicted.
We do. It's just called the Oz Does Ballroom. At least I'm pretty sure that is. I mean,
think it is supposed to be the stand-in for the philosophy club.
I mean, Glinda in the movie says it's scandalous, but it's when we go there, it appears to just be a very generic nightclub.
Yeah,
that like everybody is dressed in like fancy clothes.
Yeah,
it's like a upscale
kind of
nightclub.
it seems like a speakeasy type of a thing,
but like a fancy one. Again, everybody's wearing like suit, like fancy dress, not like not like club attire necessarily. Yeah. But yeah, so in the book, the Philosophy Club, for people who haven't read it, is essentially it's basically like a kink, sex, queer club.
Yeah.
Like, that is like what it is. There are literally, they say, like, initially they go in and they're like dancing there. And Elphaba doesn't go, and neither does Glinda. But a bunch of the Bach and a bunch of the other students go
basically
to it.
everybody
Everybody else goes to it one night. It's also kind of a stand-in for like going to a strip club with all of your friends in college and stuff like that. But I think more specifically, it is supposed to be kind of like a kink/queer club, or like gay club, because there's a line of specifically when they're all dancing about how there are several TikToks of incomplete or experimental gender, and like it's all just different people, animals and stuff, all dancing and like partying together in a way that is, I think, again, supposed to be clearly representative of going to like a gay club or something like that, where everybody can go and hang out and be friends and be free and be who they are and stuff like that. The weird part of it is there is then a public sex show that they go
where they
to,
like pull people out of
they pull people out of the crowd to have sex in front of everybody, and it includes having sex with animals, which again, within the universe of this story, is fine because they have consciousness. They're basically people. They're just animals that are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but it does, completely understand why the movie and the musicals were like, maybe we're not dealing with any of that. That is way too like messy and like difficult to try to like make work.
Yeah.
I understand what the book is going for here. This is just that, again, because this is about college. This is about experimentation and about doing weird stuff with your friends that you all are like, I don't know, like that was just what, and so there are that element of like, we went to a weird sex club and that guy had sex with a tiger. Like, what, that is what it is. I get what the book is going for. Totally makes sense to not be in the musical or the movie.
Yeah.
And so, but I also don't have the issue with it in the book that I think I've seen a lot of complaints on like reviews and stuff about this book of people being like, what was all that bullshit with the Philosophy Club? And it's like, well, I get what that bullshit is. Like, I get why it's there. And I think it's kind of interesting. Like, because I saw like reviews talking about like, it's just like you get this weird random chapter where they go to the Philosophy Club and we never even really find out what it is, but it's like a sex, and like people just it's that kind of classic thing where it's just people not engaging with what the story's trying to do. They just see a weird thing in it that is outlandish because again, it is shocking. Like what is described in that chapter is at times morally shocking if you're approaching it from, you know, a normal, like our universe perspective. Yes. There's kind of explicit descriptions of how one might have sex with a tiger that is like, Jesus Christ, like, what are we doing? But within the context of the story, like I said, I understand what that part is supposed to be. And so like, I get it. And I don't think it detracts from the story overall. And it kind of adds a little bit of weird. Again, I like the weirdness of the book that I think a lot of people maybe just don't like the weirdness of the book. Maybe. I don't know.
Speaking of weird things, as interesting and weird as the book's depiction of the wizard being a glowing skeleton is, and I don't dislike it, but I liked that the movie's depiction aligns with the 1939 film. Yeah,
I had a similar note that in the book he is described as like a skeleton, like a stormy skeleton. I don't even know. The one detail I really liked in the book is that it specifically seems to be like actively raining in the room where his little puppet thing is, and Elphaba kind of has to keep retreating a little bit because the rain and water is like blowing out towards them, and obviously she doesn't want to get wet, so she keeps like backing up, which I thought was kind of interesting and compelling. But I agree, I really like the look of the animatronic thing. It's CGI,
but it looks cool.
The big puppet, whatever you want to call it, that the wizard operates in the film, I think looks really cool, and it's like a big fun room in a way. It's fine. I could go either way on. Depending on what the skeleton looked like, I guess.
I might feel differently in the second half of the book, because in the book we have not actually met the man behind the curtain yet. But I really appreciate the musical's depiction of the wizard as a huckster.
Yeah.
He is a good old-fashioned confidence man. Because that's exactly what he is.
Exactly what he is. I like the little detail in the movie of them riding his balloon up the tower.
Yes.
Like trying to escape. It's a fun little dramatic escape moment. Leads to kind of a more dramatic parting of the ways. Like I said, I like them just kind of leaving in the book, but I do like the big action sequence at the end of the movie here. I really like Madame Morrible's propaganda speech that they broadcast about Elphaba. That at least yet nothing like that has appeared in the book. Maybe that, I could imagine something like that happening at some point. But I really like that moment in the film. I also really love the silhouettes shot. It's like it was in all the trailers where when they're up in the top of the tower and right before she like spins her cloak around right before she like jumps out the window, and it's like that slow-mo shot, and then the slow push up the broom handle. Really cool shots.
It's her superhero shot.
It's her superhero shot. I like it. It's really great.
I so absolutely love the little detail of Elphaba reaching for little Elphaba.
Yeah.
As she grasps the broom, where she like sees her reflection, but it's her as a kid.
Yes.
And then she reaches out to her and like her hand closes around the broomstick. Yeah. I really love that.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I was like, at the falling moment before the big, because this is where the music, they take some of the most liberties with like the music and adding some of these kind of dramatic moments to it, which that's one of them where she's falling. I like it. It does build up. It creates this anticipation for the big moment in a way that works. And just to get to it, Defying Gravity is an all-timer. It's like the showstopper of all showstoppers. I think the movie generally captures kind of the grandiose energy of the musical pretty damn well. That one chord progression, every time it hits, dun, 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 like that, every time it just like, it can feel it in my soul. I don't know what it is about that chord progression, but man, it's so good. And my final note here that I thought was really interesting is there's actually, which I think again kind of works when you're making a movie like this, is we get this kind of weird meta moment that right before her big run, when she's up in the sky, she like flies around and comes back and gives her speech. She does like Never Gonna Bring Me Down, and like all the lights in Emerald City like explode, and like the power goes out, and like everything turns off, and you get like this big like silence right before the moment where she does the Defying Gravity like run, and it's super cool. It feels almost too meta. Like it almost feels like the movie is too self-aware in that moment. You know what I mean? Like the universe of the movie like becomes quiet for her musical moment. It works. It's just interesting. It's like I've noticed it more this time than I did the previous times we had watched this, about how almost non-diegetic that moment is in a way that is very meta, but I think kind of works because it's like they know why everybody's here. It's for this moment. And so the movie is like, all right, we'll like really gonna like build to this moment in a way that is, yeah, I don't know. That being said, I still think, as much as I like that, I still think the moment in the stage musical is more impressive than all of the CGI in this whole ending. Just the simple lift that they do at the end with
there is really... There's fucking nothing like live theater, man.
Well, and just that particular moment, if you've never seen it, when that moment happens and she flies up to the top of the stage and her cloak becomes the entire stage, it's just, if you've never seen it before, it is one of those jaw-dropping live theater moments that, and along with all the music that is happening, it's mind-blowing in a way that watching an entirely CGI thing is just never, even as cool as it is.
But
which is very cool.
Which is very cool, but it's never going to capture the goosebumps of seeing that done
for real
in front of
you as a magic trick, it's like a real magic trick. Because in the movie, your brain goes, "This is computers."
Yeah, this is fake.
It's fake. In the theater, you're like, "This is happening." She is flying, so it's just never gonna quite match that, but it gets about as close as you can. Other than the lighting, which we'll talk about later. All right, let's go ahead and talk about what the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
One of Glinda's early lines in the movie, "Are people born wicked, or do they have wickedness thrust upon them?" is ostensibly what the book is also exploring.
Yes, that is exactly what it's about. Absolutely. One thing I noticed that I thought was interesting is that when Elphaba is like first introduced at Shiz, she is described as having long, foreign-looking black hair. And I was like, wait, is Elphaba like canonically black? Because like there was obviously when Cynthia Erivo was cast, there was people being like, oh, blah, 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 about making Elphaba black. And I was like, sounds almost like she's supposed to be. Now later we do get a further description that her hair is specifically like silky and smooth and like and so I don't think she's, because it's ostensibly it's not supposed to be like kinky like
right,
hair
it's clearly not described as like type 3 or 4 hair.
Yes, but that being said, it is described as foreign black hair, foreign looking black hair in a way where it's like, I think Elphaba is probably supposed to not be white, quote unquote, in the way that like Glinda is white. Right.
And obviously she's green, so there's a whole other layer there. But I also do wonder if she's canonically meant to be Jewish.
That
in
could
the
be,
book. Partly because of the way that witch
not canonically, but like allegorically.
Allegorically.
Not
canonically, because Judaism doesn't exist in this.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, allegorically Jewish because of the way that the classic like stereotypes of a witch have intersected with stereotypes about Jewish people throughout history. And it's a little more complicated than that because those stereotypes come from a lot of different, it's a whole big soup.
A whole lot of ethnicities that have,
But
yes, no, that's
I do wonder if maybe that was in there as well.
That very well could be. Very well could be. Absolutely. Glinda does end up stuck in a room with Elphaba. It's for different reasons, but they do. It is similar-ish enough where she doesn't want to be, and she ends up stuck in a room with Elphaba.
Bach is down bad for Glinda. Although the book does say that his crush eventually cools somewhat. I'm interested to see where that goes with Nessa Rose and how all of that plays out in the musical.
You mean the book?
We know how it plays out in the musical, but I don't know yet how it's going to play out in the book. So I'm interested to see where the book takes that.
I agree. I actually like the beginning of their crush more in the book.
I agree.
I thought it was kind of fun the way like he goes to like look at them and then like falls off a roof, and then like Elphaba finds him, and then he's like, hey, I want to meet Glinda, and then she's like, fine, I'll bring her back here, and then they have like this little meet cute, and then Elphaba like riffs their whole meet cute, which was really fun, I thought.
Yeah, she does like a peanut gallery while they're talking.
Yeah, I also love that when they meet, Glinda's like, well, we can't date because you're a Munchkinlander and I'm a Gillicanese or whatever. Also, you're a farmer and I have to marry like higher status than that. Also, you're short. Yeah. Jesus Christ. Oh, God. But I also like that the end of that first encounter, Amma Clutch shows up and drags Glinda away. And the way that played out, I was like, when I read that, I don't know if you got this, I was actually wondering if their implication there was supposed to be that Elphaba had tipped off Amma Clutch. Or not. Amma Clutch says she heard it from somebody else. I can't remember who. But if Elphaba had tipped off whoever that other person
had like
was
orchestrated this whole thing.
And I was like, this might be the greatest wingmanning ever by Elphaba. That Elphaba tipped off that other person to tip off Amma Clutch so that Amma Clutch would show up and drag Glinda away, thus creating...
Right, and forbid the relationship.
Yes,
thus
creating the forbidden romance.
The allure of the forbidden romance.
I don't ultimately think that's probably what it was, because later, like, just the way it peters out and they don't end up together. It seemed, if that was the case, it just seems like why would he have written that in as being the case of like this kind of implied thing if that relationship didn't end up mattering really all that much. That being said, when I was reading it in that moment, it seemed like maybe that was like Elphaba being like a next level wingman. I was like, that's pretty amazing. We do get in both the movie and the book, and it is there is an explicit scene of it in the book, Dilliman kind of lecturing them about how animals are being persecuted and they're changing the laws and all this sort of stuff. And he's kind of the professor that is, he's their woke professor who is teaching them what's going on in the world. Bach, it's Crope and Tippett, or Tibbet or whatever, I believe, who I'm fairly certain are implied to be gay in the book.
Pretty strongly,
based on the way Bach describes them. But they like to hang out in the Three Queens library, and I was like, could this be our Dancing Through Life inspiration in the film? We got the gay guys hanging out in the library. It's like, it could be where that comes from.
The Great Drought is briefly mentioned in the movie. In the book, it's actively happening. It had been happening like since the beginning of the book, so a very long drought. Yeah, we do briefly see the green bottle at the beginning of the book, although Nanny takes it, so Elphaba is not sleeping with it under her pillow that we know of. Yeah. Specifically, Milena says, I remember once there was a tinker with a funny accent that gave me a draft of some heady brew from a green glass bottle. Another moment that I was like, close enough. In the movie, Glinda says to Elphaba, why, Miss Elphaba, look at you. You're beautiful. Versus in the book, she says, oh, Miss Elphaba, you terrible mean thing. You're pretty. Yeah. That scene is also built in the book, is built around Elphaba trying on one of Glinda's hats. Yes. So I imagine that's where that idea for that scene in the musical of her getting the hat and stuff from her, it doesn't play out remotely the same. She just tries it on and it's not like ugly or, she's just like, oh yeah, whatever. But her trying on one of Glinda's hats, I was like, that's gotta be where they got that idea from. I thought Elphaba has this read of Glinda as a character in the book that I thought was really fascinating, and I just wanted to read because it kind of summarizes who she is and does match the version of Glinda that we get in the film. You know, Bach, she said, the thing is, I have become fond of Glinda myself. Behind her starry-eyed love of herself, there is a mind struggling to work. She does think about things. When her mind is really working, she could, if led, think on you even, I suspect, somewhat fondly, I suspect. I don't know, but when she slides back into herself, I mean into the girl who spends 2 hours a day curling that beautiful hair, it's as if the thinking Glinda goes into some internal closet and shuts the door, or as if she's in hysterical retreat from things that are too big for her. I love her both ways, but I find it odd. I wouldn't mind leaving myself behind if I could, but I don't know the way out. And just so, there's two versions of Glinda. There's the Glinda that thinks about things and the Glinda who is worried about fashion and being popular. Elphaba canonically can sing.
Yes, this cracked me up. She can sing in the book. They go to a pub. Yeah, and they're like,
they find out she can sing,
and they're like, sing us a song. Elphaba made up a little song on the spot, a song about longing and otherness, but far away in future days, strangers close their eyes to listen. And I love to imagine that canonically in the book, she is singing an a cappella version of Defying Gravity in that moment. Because that is kind of a song about longing and otherness and far away in future days and all that sort of stuff. There might be a better example in the second act that I'm not thinking of like a song for that. I don't know. But I thought that was very funny. I was like just imagining her belting Defying Gravity in a pub with like 30 people by herself. But yeah, she can sing. And then also, so that song is specifically about like a land without injustice and all this sort of stuff. And when she finishes, Nessa has a comment about how that they can find a place like that. She was singing about how she was singing about the afterlife or something like that. And I was like, oh, classic religion. The only way we can get a good world is to fucking die and just arrive there. We can't possibly make that happen. No. We have to just die and achieve it in that way. Yeah.
Glinda kind of sort of siding with the wizard at the end.
Yeah.
Or at least trying to distance herself from some of Elphaba's more radical rhetoric.
Yeah, in both the movie and the book, Elphaba is like, hey, fuck you. This is, you got to do this is dog shit or whatever.
And Glinda's like, let's think about this.
Let's calm down a little bit, yeah.
And then the ending in both, the ending of the first two sections of the book and the ending of the movie is pretty different, but the idea is kind of the same.
Yeah.
The first act of the story ends with Elphaba and Glinda going to see the wizard, and then Elphaba going off to be a revolutionary without Glinda.
While Glinda stays behind.
Yeah.
Very similar broadly. I was actually surprised at how similar that was. I was expecting it to be way more different. I was like, yeah, we kind of end up in like the same spot, even though how we get there is very different. All right, we got some stuff that we want to talk about in Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
So normally Lost in Adaptation is stuff like we're confused about in the book versus the movie or whatever, and getting more context. This is kind of just our catch-all to discuss stuff that we didn't know where else to put.
Yeah, I was kind of putting two different types of things in here. One is that like changes that I didn't really know what to do with because I don't know how the second half of the book is going to play out. And also changes that I was like, six of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my first notes was that I think we'll have to put a pin in No One Mourns the Wicked and see if there's anything similar to that scene at the end of the book. Because there is the whole last section of the book is titled The Murder and Its Afterlife. So I think it's possible we could get some
like
similar.
Something similar about people like celebrating after she dies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've touched on this, but I think it's interesting that Elphaba is radicalized way earlier in the book through her experiences as a missionary, essentially.
Just through her whole childhood, but yeah.
And like she distrusts the wizard before we even get to Shiz, which is interesting and made me wonder if that's why she seemed more immune to Madame Morrible than Glinda and Nessa Rose did.
In the book,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see where all of that goes in the second half of the book. That being said, I think the way the movie handles her character arc works really well.
Yeah.
She kind of gets taken in by feeling accepted for the first time by Madame Morrible, who, as I said, seems to be a better manipulator in the movie.
Yes.
One similarity between book and movie Elphaba is that they both think the wizard will change his mind about animals once presented with new evidence.
Yeah. I felt that was my note, is that I thought the wizard and I kind of captured some of Elphaba's naivete about like that we get in the book about the wizard, which she is suspicious of him, but also we get an exchange or a line in the book where she thinks, but of course he must be. He's a man in power. It's his job to consider changes in knowledge. Like when they're talking about like, they're basically like, well, if I take him this information about the animals, obviously, surely he'll do the right thing, basically. And so the book does set her up as kind of very naive and idealistic in that way, which I felt ran a little bit contrary to her general air of cynicism about the world that she has in the book. And like, she's a lot, like, as you said, she's a lot more suspicious of authority and stuff in a way. While at the same time, she kind of has this blind trust that if she goes and presents her evidence. I thought that was interesting.
I do think that is kind of a typical thing of being in that like college era, early 20s phase of your life where you're like, you're starting to see how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
in the world, but you also still have that kind of naive quality of like, surely people are good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's fair. Speaking of, you mentioned this earlier about the exchange where Glinda and Elphaba first meet, and I have this note. There's this moment during the Wizard and I song in the movie, and I put this here because I just wanted to talk about it. I didn't know how I felt about it, where Elphaba is singing, and she sings about how she's going to go and talk to the wizard, and he's going to ask what she wants, and she can say she doesn't want to be green anymore.
Yeah.
Or not even that. She's not that she will say that. He'll
offer to degreenify
and she'll say, no. Obviously, I don't want that. But if you want to do that, sure.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I don't think Book Elphaba would remotely care about being
think so either.
Degrenified or whatever. Also, I felt like that moment, even in this movie, runs kind of contrary to the moment where she first meets Glinda, and Glinda says like, hey, I'm going to study and I'm going to become the best sorcerer so that I can help you with your problem. And when she says problem, Elphaba has like a crestfallen like, oh, you see my skin color is a problem. Implying that Elphaba does not see her skin color as something she would want. I do think it's just playing with the complex emotions that people have about their own appearance and stuff like that. I think that's fair, but there is a little bit of a tension there that like...
I think that tension makes sense. I think it is perfectly reasonable to have something that you might maybe not like so much about yourself, but you would object to somebody else having a problem with it. Yeah. I think those are two different things.
Okay, so that's fair. So it works within the context of the movie. That being said, I still think it's very clearly a change from her character within the book. I don't think her character in the book would have that moment of like...
I don't either.
Wizard, you want to turn me not green? Sure. Yeah.
But it also, in the book, it seems like her being green is not as much of an issue as it is.
Yeah, nobody brings it up anymore.
In the, like, it comes up occasionally, but people generally don't seem to really care that much. Yeah. And maybe that's because there are also a lot of other differently colored people in the universe of the book.
That's true. It's less weird when there's people with like other colors.
Yeah, when they're also red and blue people, it's maybe a little less weird for somebody to be green. Yeah. But I also mentioned this earlier, but I thought it was interesting in the book that Elphaba doesn't seem to show any like magical aptitude because it's such a big part of the movie and the musical. Yeah. Is that she has these powers that she can't control.
Yes, which I do like that scene in the movie early on where she like throws the rocks at the kids. Just setting up that she can't control the power, but also that she has these powers. She can't really super control them, but she also kind of can control them, but also she stands up to bullies. Like there's a lot of character work happening there that I like. I will say, because I thought the same thing. I was like, wow, yeah, she is not seemingly have any magical powers in the book at this point. There is one scene that I think is supposed to allude to that, though. I don't know if you noticed this. They have that one scene where it's early on, Glinda and Elphaba are hanging out in the tower. I think it's the night they're discussing. It's like the first time they have an actual conversation. And they talk about how it is storming outside. And like, because she at one point goes and looks at herself in the window, the reflection of herself with the hat on or whatever in the window. And like it's storming and a leaf blows up. And then the next day they're talking to Amma Clutch. And Amma Clutch mentions that it didn't rain the night before, and they're like, what? Did it only rain on our tower? And I think there might be an implication there that Elphaba did that, like it was in like passively maybe she caused it to storm around the tower like through in the same way as in the book, kind of,
like through her emotions,
through emotional reaction, whatever. Maybe I don't know, because that they're mentioned that is never touched on again. We never find out if somebody else did that or like what that, it's never, so far it has not been touched on again. So I thought that just might be what that is. Maybe, I don't know.
So I knew going into this book.
I did not.
I knew this. I had read this as like a fun fact between the like book and the musical before. I knew going into this book that Nessa Rose didn't have arms. That was like part of her disability in the book. But I 100% thought that she was also still in a wheelchair in the book. She's not. No, she just doesn't have arms.
Doesn't have arms.
And I definitely get why they would change that particularly for a stage show.
Yeah.
Because hiding an actor's arms on stage like that, I'm sure could be done.
That was my thought. I was like, well, you could do that. You could just
could do
wrap
that.
their arms behind their back, and then
But
you
it-
made the very obvious point.
It feels potentially dangerous.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't think about that. Yeah, if they trip or anything at any point, they just
You
face
just-
plant.
Yeah, you just can't catch yourself.
Yeah, that's very dangerous.
Also, you would have to be like very careful about the way that you did that because you could damage your arms.
Yeah. You could definitely do it, but I think your point about it being dangerous, if you trip, you just smash your face on the stage, and that would
And
be
like
bad.
if this had started as a movie and not as
in a movie, you
a
could probably
stage show, I think they probably would have just gone with her not having arms because they would have done some early CGI or something to disappear
like
her
that,
arms.
yeah. Do you remember? I put this here because I figured might as well talk about the sapphic element of this story somewhere. Do you remember if What Is This Feeling has some of the sapphic undertones in the musical that it does in the movie?
Yes.
It does? Okay. I don't remember the specifics in the movie, but the way that starts, it obviously reads like they're talking about having a crush on each other.
Absolutely the movie leaning into both the implication in the stage show and also the like ensuing fandom lore of Wicked.
So, okay, but my point was, when you said it's the movie leaning into it, that was what I'm asking, is how much of that kind of text in the movie is actually, I would have to remember that right before What Is This Feeling starts, or right at the beginning of it, there's this exchange, or it might even be a line in the song. I can't remember what it is.
Is it my face is flushing, my head is reeling?
Yeah.
Something. That's from the
okay.
Yes.
So do you think in the musical that is the implication, or if that's just people have since read that? Now, to be fair, it's also in the book.
Yeah.
I think this book has some sapphic undertones in the same way in their relationship.
I think the book is pro Gelfie.
Yes, it seems like it. Okay, because because there's a handful of different moments and stuff. One of them, they sleep in the same bed, and there's even a line where it says like Glinda tells herself it's for protection.
Yeah.
The reason they're sleeping in bed together, and it's like the exact wording of tells herself it's for protection is very. My eye was like, what does that mean? And I was like, okay, interesting. And so anyways, I wanted to talk about this here because I have not had it spoiled, and I am assuming, based on the fact that I haven't had it spoiled, that the second movie does not make it canon. No. It doesn't? Okay.
No.
Okay. I was like,
do
you think they're going to do it?
You're going to have to go to fanfic for that.
I thought there was a chance that they might say, fuck it, we're just going to do it. And I thought I had heard like interviews where like Grande and Arrivo had alluded to potentially, maybe they were just playing it up for marketing or whatever. But okay, so they don't make the ship canon in the sequel?
No.
Okay.
So in regard to your question, specifically about What Is This Feeling, I think, in my opinion, that particularly the beginning of What Is This Feeling is absolutely supposed to be suggestive.
It's supposed to be suggestive, yeah.
And I think that the movie is able to lean into that a little more by showing like close-ups of them and like,
Yeah, like laying in bed staring at each other, yeah. I guess my question is, I'd be interested, and I'm sure it's been answered, if when writing the book / the music for this, if that was their... I know it's being suggestive intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if it's supposed to be... I don't know how to describe this. If the suggestiveness of it is just for a wink and a nod as like for fun, as a joke, or if it's literally supposed to be like, maybe... You know what I mean? Like about them. I don't know.
That's a good question. And I don't know. I know that suggestiveness is there.
Yeah.
And different productions of Wicked play it up or down.
Yeah.
And it is definitely a thing that has, since the musical's beginning, consumed the fandom.
Obviously, yeah.
As for how much of that is like sincere within the actual musical,
like how much of it is Schwartz and Holtzman being like, this is our ship. Like we ship them, and that's why we're writing this, even if we're not going to actually do it. You know what I mean? Versus just like we're using evocative language to help communicate emotion. You know, I could see it either way, and so I was just curious. And I'm like I said, I'm sure it has been discussed by them at some point. There's no way they haven't been. There's no way they haven't been asked over the years. So I've just never seen them talk about it. So.
This was really funny to me as I was reading the book because I was remembering after the first movie came out, some of the like jokes online about Glinda sending Dorothy walking to the Emerald City when high-speed rail exists in Oz.
Oh, yeah.
And it turns out, canonically, per the book, Oz does have a train system.
It has train, yeah.
It has
I don't know
trains.
if it's high speed, but it has train.
Yeah. It has trains, although notably it does not have a train running from Shiz to the Emerald City.
They specifically say they have to take like a carriage or something like that.
Because the train does not run between the two of them.
Yeah. On the topic of Ozian infrastructure, in the movie, the wizard is in the middle of building the road, the yellow brick road, or, well, he can't decide on the color, and that's what they talk about. And I can't entirely recall the timeline of the road in the book, but wasn't the road already built?
I think the road is supposed to be something that's like an ongoing project throughout the entirety of the book.
Yeah, it has already been being worked on. Like it's not like a new thing he's gonna do. It's like already being
part of Turtle Heart's thing was that they don't want the yellow brick road built in Quadling Country because of how fragile their ecosystem is. And they'll have to like dam up
the water and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I was trying to be like, okay, but was it the wizard? And now I can't remember. I would have to go back and I can't remember if it was already being built before the wizard showed up.
I think it was.
And yeah, that's what I thought. And then the wizard is just expanding it and continuing it. So the point being, in the movie, him being like, I want to build this road. What color should it be? Is not really. They added that for almost more of like an Easter egg for like. Yeah, for people who've only seen The Wizard of Oz.
Apparently, he builds the road pretty fast in the movie's universe.
Because
I don't think that much time is supposed to pass between the first and second, like a few years.
Yeah. I don't know.
But it takes a long time to build roads, guys.
It's true.
Another thing that I'm not entirely sure what to do with yet is the book's revelation that Elphaba and Nessa Rose have a younger brother named Shell.
Yeah.
If nothing, if we like never meet him and that's not important, then that's like a nothing change.
Yeah, getting rid of him doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. If he has some kind of role to play in the second half of the book, I may have different opinions on that.
Exactly. Yep. I'm in the same spot.
Similarly, I'm also gonna reserve judgment on where Nessa's silver slippers come from.
Yeah, and like
because
what their deal
in
is.
The movie they very explicitly are like handed down from her mother.
Yeah, we see them at the foot of her mother's bed.
Yeah.
When she's giving birth to Elphaba.
Yeah.
And then later her dad
gives them to
Nessa.
And then in the book, her father does gift her these silver slippers, but he purchased them.
He says he purchased them from a tinkerer and that he added the silver glass beads.
Yeah.
And we were discussing like, is it in the book the implication that those are the same slippers that he found and bought these slippers from a tinkerer, and those are the same slippers that Bach saw in that painting, or is it just a similar thing?
Is it like a foreshadowing thing? I don't know.
We don't know yet. We'll
because
find
in
out
the
maybe.
Musical, Elphaba is the one who enchants the silver slippers,
right?
But we don't know yet what's going to happen.
We don't know in the book. Yeah, it could be a thing where in the book they're already enchanted and they are the same ancient artifact, and the musical didn't want to explain all that backstory, so just said, well, we'll just have Elphaba enchant them. Well, that could be. We'll see. Yeah, we don't know yet. I'm also interested to see if the Grimoire shows up in the second half of the book.
Yeah.
It's not mentioned at all in the first half.
We have not encountered it yet.
Not heard of the Grimoire. I was like, maybe that's what Bach had. I don't like. Maybe that's what the picture of the Kumbric witch is in. Probably not. I don't know. But yeah, I was interested. I was like, well, we'll see. I guess if the Grimoire becomes a thing or not.
One thing that I was like absolutely fully expecting to encounter in the book, but we haven't, at least not yet, are the made up, or more accurately, slightly bastardized words in the musical, like rejoicify and disgustified.
Yes.
I 100% thought that was going to be a thing they were pulling from the book. And apparently it's just not.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, yeah. I would be amazed if it just became a thing in the second half, because not a single time has it occurred in the first half of the book. So yeah, I agree. I enjoy those in the movie though. I thought they're from the musical, obviously, but I thought that was fun. But yeah, we'll see. But it seems like it's just not a thing in the book. A big change that I was unsure of how I felt about, but I just wanted to mention, is that in the book, Elphaba basically just, when they leave Oz, they leave the Emerald City. She tells Glinda, go back to Shiz.
I'm not coming.
I'm not coming, but you go back. They won't. Or she says something like, they'll believe that you weren't involved, like whatever, that I kind of forced you here against your will or whatever. So you can just go back to school. She kind of just forces her to do it, and then they go their separate ways. In the movie, she asks Glinda to come with her, and Glinda says no.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big change, and I'm interested to see how that change feels. Right now, it doesn't really matter currently, but it does, because really what it is just, it makes sense, because were she to ask her in the book, Glinda would just come with her. Yeah. Because at this point, Glinda is already like on her side, mostly for the most part, seemingly, generally on her side. Whereas in the movie, they're playing it more nebulous because Glinda has not had her full kind of arc yet.
She hasn't had her full arc yet, and she's interested in protecting herself.
Yes.
Whereas in the book, I think it could be really interesting, because I feel like what could play out is this idea that by essentially abandoning Glinda, that in a way Elphaba then causes her to go further down that road.
Yeah.
By like leaving her to that fate, basically.
Yeah, and they're going to probably play out similarly, I would imagine, where it's that Elphaba or Glinda, while being...
Well, we know who these two characters become.
Yes.
So
yeah. So I think it'll work out similarly either way, but that specific choice was interesting, and I'm interested to see how it plays out in the second. Also, I'll just add, and I've said this before, I actually remember very little of the second half of the musical, and I have not seen the second movie. So for whatever reason, I just don't. And I think part of it is just because I know all the songs. Like, I like the songs in the first half more, so I just remember the plot around it better. I just much.
Act 1 of Wicked is in my opinion, better and more memorable than the second act.
I agree with that. But so I don't remember all the details of what all goes down in the second half of the musical. So part of me is I'm interested to see how that all plays out and how I feel about that specific choice when we get there. And then the last note I had here is that in the movie, we see Frex during the big musical number, while Morable's giving her speech, we cut back to Nessa Rose is at home with her dad.
We see what some of the other characters are doing.
Yeah, we see Fiyero rides his horse away. We don't know what he's up to. Other characters doing other stuff, but we cut back and see Nessa Rose at home with Frex, their dad. And when he hears the radio broadcast about Elphaba being an enemy of the state or whatever, he seemingly has a heart attack and falls over dead.
Yes.
And I'm interested to see where that goes, if that happens because that did not happen in the book.
No, at least not yet. I'm assuming something
like that probably
will happen
because that is a big part of what the fallout between Nessa and Elphaba,
although in
right?
the book, their dad is not the ruler.
No, he's not a governor or whatever. He's just a guy.
Probably what will happen. So a big thing in the book is that Elphaba is the third Throp descending, which means that she's next in line for the throne of Munchkin land, kind of. So I'm betting what'll happen is that Nessa Rose will get elevated to that position instead, because Elphaba is going to become a domestic terrorist, basically. And that's how she becomes then the Wicked Witch of the East.
Yeah. All right, we got a handful of odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
Mentioned this a couple times, but I am so glad that I recently read both The Marvelous Land of Oz and Ozma of Oz, and even that we recently watched Return to Oz, because I feel like there's so many little things here and there in the book that I probably wouldn't have caught.
There was a mention of the Gnome King in the book.
Yeah,
and I was like,
the
Gnome King.
I was like, Gnome King mentioned. And we had not settled on Wicked as the next summer series when we covered Return to Oz. So that was just 10 out of 10 foresight on my part.
Good planning.
Another little detail in the movie that I had not noticed the first 2 times we watched it was that in the intro, we go over the rainbow before seeing the rest of Oz.
I had never thought
which
about
I thought
that
was
either.
really fun.
Yeah, that shot over the
yeah,
like,
as
tulip
we like
fields or the flower fields.
when we
or
come
whatever.
up the side of the cliff,
Yeah.
we go over a rainbow and then we see like Munchkin Land.
Yeah. Every time I've seen this movie, that like not flashback, but the scene from Elphaba's childhood where they're sitting out in the garden, and she's sitting there talking, and Nessa Rose is a baby, and she's like talking to Nessa Rose. The baby playing Nessa Rose, the way she says, "Yeah," every time gets me so. Her "yeah" is so funny. It's the best performance in the movie. Yeah. I like the way she says "yeah" is so funny and cute. Kills me every time.
This is actually slightly before that, but when Glinda's in during No One Mourns the Wicked, having a giant burnable effigy just ready and waiting is crazy work.
Yep.
Y'all Munchkins are crazy.
Yep. Because I just genuinely couldn't remember this. Is the Glinda hair flip thing from the musical?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious if that was like this movie thing or a musical thing. I just genuinely couldn't remember.
Michelle Yeoh
Yeah.
can like just barely talk a song well enough to get by here.
Yeah.
And Madame Morrible is not like a song, she's not a singing heavy role,
No.
but she can like just barely do it enough to get by here.
Yeah, I don't think Michelle Yeoh's like awful in this. I generally quite like her. I think she's fantastic in Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I don't think she's great in this movie. I think
not great.
I don't think she's miscast. She has moments like when you're watching her
Yeah.
play this, like she's great as like the physicality of this role, but like something about, and I think part of it's the singing is like that song. She just doesn't, she can't carry that song. And again, not that it's not a huge, but it is one of those where you're like, she's not my favorite. I actually feel similarly about Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
I like parts of his performance.
Yeah. And I think he was like a very obvious choice.
Very obvious choice. Yeah. I like elements of his performance, but it also sometimes feels like he's not taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Which kind of works for the role in a way.
But is also
a little annoying.
Okay.
Like it's just like it feels like he's there to like.
The problem is that like it kind of works for the role, but then it also is like, okay, so you're just doing Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah. Which again, because he's a huckster, it kind of works.
Yeah.
Like in a meta way of like he's like putting on a weird show and it's like all an act or whatever. But you can really feel Jeff Goldblum acting on the screen, and so the whole
he's
thing.
at his Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, and so the whole thing. I don't know. I was mixed on it. And I feel similarly about Michelle Yeoh, where it's just I felt like I don't know how well
the
this
other
works.
thing about Michelle Yeoh in this role, I don't know how much you remember her in The School for Good and Evil.
Oh,
but
yeah.
this really reminded me of her role in that, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Make Fiyero blue, you cowards.
Yeah.
I do like that his horse is blue.
Wait, is he blue? I thought I must have misread that. I knew he had like diamonds on his face.
No, he's blue.
Okay.
He's blue in the book. He's a blue man.
Because I remember specifically them saying that he seemed to have like this diamond pattern on
he
his
has
face.
like a diamond pattern on his skin, which I wasn't 100% sure if that was supposed to be like tattoos or just like his skin. But he's 100% the Winkies are blue in the book.
Fair.
And his horse is blue in the movie as like a nod to that, I assume.
Is it blue?
Yes.
It's always in a nighttime scene, so it's hard to tell.
There's the one scene where he first walks into the Shiz courtyard.
You're right.
You can see that his horse is blue.
Okay.
It's like a blink and you miss it moment.
Because every other scene it's at night and it's just like dark and so.
You can't tell. Speaking of though, Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo pass for college students far better than Jonathan Bailey does, I'm afraid.
A little bit. I think they all look a little old.
They all look a little old, but I think that the girls are doing a better job of looking young
Cynthia
than he
Erivo
is.
in particular, it helps. I think the green skin, and her wardrobe helps because it's harder to tell. Like, you know what I mean? Like she's more obscured. Like whereas but yes, generally, I
like
agree
Jonathan Bailey looks like a man in his 30s.
Yeah. There's a little moment in the book that I thought was funny where Elphaba says that she always imagined a dwarf or acrobats inside of Grommatic operating him, which is literally what was true if you listen to our Return to Oz episode. TikTok in that there was literally an acrobat inside of it, like hunched over,
and that could be a reference to the movie.
Yes, yeah, I actually think it probably is a reference to the movie or to Return to Oz. A great little cinematic moment in the movie that I love is right at the beginning of Popular when she's leading into the song and she starts singing the moment you will be right before Popular. And she's like leaning closer to her. We get this staged dolly push where the camera like pushes in, and then gets really close right before. I love that moment. It's such a great little detail.
And not that she wasn't already doing great, because she was.
Yeah.
Prior to this, but Popular is what really sold me on Ariana Grande as Galinda, because I think like going into this movie, she was the thing that I was most like, I don't know about.
Yeah, her manic ass energy as Glinda, particularly during Popular, it works really well, and that she sells it in that number for sure.
I also love the little Ruby Slippers cameo during Popular.
Yeah. I love Arrivo's version of "I'm Not That Girl" in this. I think it's super pretty. I don't love. It also always reminds me of a song that I can never place, and I still don't know what it is. Every time I hear it, I'm like, that sounds like something else to me, and I don't know what it is. But I will say, as I mentioned earlier, I don't love the lighting in that scene, and it because it's just like a CG forest, and it's too dark.
I get what they were going for, but it doesn't look good.
It's like one of those where it's like you just need a little more, like go a little less realistic with the lighting, and just give us some
little more
moonbeams.
fantasy.
Give us a little more.
It's a magical fantasy land forest.
At
it's
night,
and
just give us more there.
Yeah. No, after you mentioned, after we watched this, that it reminded you of some other song, I was Googling and I was trying to figure out if maybe somebody else had pointed out, because sometimes composers have like, you can hear like similarities in parts of their songs from different shows.
100%.
So I was trying to look and I was like, maybe there's some other thing that he's written that has like a similar, like, you know, chord progression or something somewhere. And I couldn't find anything, but I did find a whole Reddit thread of people talking about how "I'm Not That Girl" is their least favorite song in the first act. And I was like, it's not like high on my list. It's not one of my favorites, but saying that "I'm Not That Girl" is your least favorite is wild when A Sentimental Man exists.
Yeah, okay, fair. I was gonna say, I was like, I could actually see that, but then I remembered Sentimental Man, and it doesn't get to the same heights as a lot of the other music in it, but I genuinely think it's one of the prettier like songs in that first. I think it's I don't know, I really love it. I think it's really beautiful, but that being said, compared to everything else in the first act,
compared to some of the more like fun bombastic numbers, I get it. But also, literally my next note here is I always forget that we have to suffer through A Sentimental Man before we can get to Defying Gravity.
Yeah, we get to suffer through either Jeff Goldblum or somebody pretending to be Jeff Goldblum, mumbling through. Like, that's another one where it's like, just get somebody who can sing.
A Sentimental Man is one of those numbers that it's a set change, costume change number
where time.
It exists to fill time so that we can do things backstage and put things in place for the next big number.
Yeah.
Which is Defying Gravity.
Yes.
And speaking of Defying Gravity, I do love the way that Elphaba's cloak seems to grow towards the end of Defying Gravity in the movie as like a nod to the stage show, where we have the absurdly long cloak that's used to help hide the lift apparatus that the actress stands on to fly. But I also think it works as like a dramatic nod to her growing power and like eventual darkness.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a great choice because I remember thinking before going to see the movie, like, how are they going to do this big moment, at the end? And I think they do a pretty good job. I will say, overall, I actually quite like the lighting and coloring of this movie broadly. A lot of people, like I said earlier, a lot of people have complained about it. I think it mostly works. I think that particular scene, the shots of her in the sky, when the camera's looking up at her, she's just underlit and not contrasty enough with the background. Like, I understand what they're doing with the background. It's like dawn. We have this purpley turmoil-filled background. It's like a storm building behind her as well. Like, I get what they're going for, but it ends up being muddier and less dynamic than that moment deserves. Like, in my opinion, like, it just, I don't know what they could have done there. Like, maybe a big, like, God ray from the sun blast. Something. It needed something to just make her stand out more and pop more and to make that moment more dramatic. That's like the one big moment that I think looks kind of bad. Not overall, like a lot of that looks fine, but just like the close-ups of her in that moment where it's like, this is the moment, and it's just, it doesn't look great in my opinion.
My last note here, just me being a theater kid. Because back in the day, I wanted to be cast as Elphaba so bad. Not that I was unique for that, because that was like the role when I was in high school. I wanted to be Elphaba so bad. Although I acknowledged that as at the time, petite blonde soprano who was never much of a belter, I had a far better chance of locking down Galinda. I never got the opportunity to be in a production of Wicked. If I had at the right moment, I probably could have been Galinda. But alas.
Do you want to share your fun little family connection to this?
Yeah.
I was realized it wasn't in the notes anywhere. I feel like you should mention it.
I do feel a little weird talking about it because I don't know him personally.
I still
At least I don't think I ever met him. If I did, it would have been when I was really little. But Norbert Leo Butz, who originated the role of Fiyero on Broadway, is my cousin Emily's uncle. On her dad's side, so not on my side.
He's from St. Louis. And also my mom was in shows with him. Your mom has performed with him.
Performed with Norbert Leo Butz. Like in musicals when she was in high school and college maybe, which is cool. It's fun. That's my lock on 6 degrees of separation. I can get to so many people through.
You're like 2 degrees from a lot of people. 3 degrees from probably a lot of people. No, 100%. Well, it was particularly funny because as we were watching the movie, we get a cameo during all the cameos at the end when Idina Menzel and Kristen Chenoweth show up. We also get Stephen Schwartz as the guard who like welcomes them in to meet the wizard. And then also the guy who's like narrating the play. I looked it up and it says on Wikipedia that he is Fiyero in the original Broadway production. And then I was like, wait, but I thought, and then you were like, wait, no, that was, and it's so actually, and I don't know if it was why they got this guy and not, so this guy that makes a cameo in the movie doing that is the guy who was the understudy for Fiyero, and he was also in the company or whatever.
Usually understudies are in the ensemble.
And he took over for Fiyero. He was the replacement for Fiyero, but he was not the original Fiyero. And I wondered if there was like a scheduling thing where they couldn't get him.
No,
or why
I'm not sure why he didn't cameo in this.
Why he wouldn't get a cameo, but this guy would. You know what I mean? I just thought that was interesting.
Maybe he didn't want to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. All right, before we hit the final verdict, we want to remind you can do us a favor by heading over to Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, Goodreads, any of those places. We would love to hear what you have to say about Wicked. Pretty short turnaround on the. Well, we'll give it a few days.
Yeah, we'll put out the next prequel a day or two later so that people have more time to respond.
Have a little bit more time to respond. But since this episode's a little late, it will be not a super long turnaround before the next prequel. But we would love to hear what you have to say about Wicked the movie, Wicked the musical, Wicked the book, the first half of it. Interact. We will talk about that on the next prequel episode. You can also help us by heading over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to our show. Write us a nice little 5-star review. Give us a 5-star rating. All that kind of stuff. Super helps out. And you can support us at patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there. Get access to bonus content starting at the $5 a month level. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Sentence fast, verdict after.
That's stupid.
For years, all I've ever heard from people who've read Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West is that it's terrible. An awful book. But in reading the first 180 pages or so, that wasn't my experience. Is it the best book ever? No. But my main complaint is that the writing feels a little YA, with some random sex sprinkled in. And I'm wondering if that's because Gregory Maguire was primarily a children's author prior to writing the Wicked books. Now, of course, I may change my mind in the second half, but overall, I'm enjoying it. It goes down pretty easy. The movie and the musical presents a pretty different story, albeit working off of the same narrative skeleton, and there are more similarities than I had anticipated. Those similarities are just similar in the way that apples and oranges are both fruit, and not similar like two different varieties of apple are the same but different. There is some stuff that I really like about the book. I love the expanded and more nuanced backstory for Elphaba's childhood. I loved Galinda's more fleshed out and more nuanced character. I loved that basically all of the movie characters, plus a few extra, are a college friend group. And I loved that a lot of the lore felt more informed by the weirdness of the original Oz books. But I was pretty surprised by how much of the first half of this book isn't really about Elphaba. Part 1 is more about her family and parents. In Part 2, we mainly see her through the eyes of Galinda and then Bach, who also both have their own things going on. I was prepared for the book's world and story to be bigger than the film, but I wasn't prepared for such relative distance from the main character. At least so far, I think I prefer the movie's take on Elphaba as a young girl who gets drawn in and manipulated, but who ultimately can't be swayed from her convictions. And honestly, I like the songs. The first half of this musical is almost entirely banger after banger. I'm going to give this one to the movie, but to be honest, I don't feel particularly strongly about that verdict. I'm looking forward to judging these properties against each other as complete pieces.
Well, this is going to sound pretty similar. I wrote this separately. The only thing I had ever heard about this book was that it wasn't very good, and that it was weird. So weird and bad. Well, after reading roughly half of it, I'm here to tell you that, so far, I think it's weird and pretty good. I've really enjoyed the deeper, weirder, and more complex world of Oz that this book presents. I like learning about all the bickering religions and the political factions, and I think the book makes the world of Oz feel like a real physical world with history and weight. The political messaging is a bit didactic, and no one could ever accuse it of being subtle, but I think it works fairly well. There's a bit of a strange tension between the writing style, which feels more akin to a YA novel like Harry Potter, and some of the subject matter, but it ends up feeling like a relatively natural progression. Harry Potter and Percy Jackson and a million other YA fantasy series are for teenagers. This one's for people in their 20s. The movie is far better than I expected it to be upon a first viewing, and it holds up upon a third. I don't love all of the creative choices, but overall I think it's a fun, relatively colorful, and well-crafted presentation of the musical on the big screen. Arrivo and Grande are both fantastic, and I'm not sure either role could have been done better. Jonathan Bailey's great. Yo and Goldblum are a mixed bag. But the thing that the movie gets most right, and it's the most important part, are the big musical moments. It has the energy and the bombacity that you need from Wicked, the movie. I really can't tell you which I prefer more. The book has more interesting stuff going on, but the movie is a soaring emotional roller coaster that has made me cry or nearly cry every time I've watched it. So I think for now, I'm going to give it to the movie. But part 2 could change everything. Katie, what's next?
Up next, we're talking about 2025's Wicked, for good.
Yes. Obviously, yeah, we will be wrapping up our 2026 summer series, talking about Wicked for Good, the second half of the musical and the second half of this book. Join us in 2 weeks' time when we're doing that, and come back in 1 week's time, or just under 1 week's time, as we see what you all had to say about Wicked. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
Keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.